Chapter 1296 Divine Eyes of the Ninth Netherworld Who? A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. With a simple flip, the information within the book flowed into Zhongxian's head. Golden Script Seal, an artifact created by the first head of the Sanctum of Sages, Sage Kuei. It possesses the ability to seal the transient and eternalize it. There is a total of 7 flaws. Number 1. It can only seal non-living objects as living beings would suffocate under the effects of the seal. Number 2. Its defenses are extremely weak. Sword Qi would be able to destroy it. Zhongxian clutched his forehead speechlessly. What he wanted to know was the information concerning the vat and, more importantly, what was inside it. Yet, for information on the seal to appear instead, what a headache. But thinking deeper into it, it was natural that the Library of Heaven's Path would react in such a manner. The vat was a non-living object, so it required physical contact in order to compile a book on it. However, it happened that the seals were currently in its active state, so its flaws were reflected instead. This was truly a dilemma. Considering that this was a test on his eye of insight, he could not just step forward to touch the vat. Zhongxian contemplated deeply for a moment before a thought suddenly struck him. While I can't see anything through the eye of insight, it should be possible to deduce what's within it through the flaws of the seal. He had already assessed the entire vat all over with his eye of insight, but perhaps due to the long age of the vat or the jarring radiance blinding his sight, he was really unable to find any clues as to what could be stored in the vat. However, through the seals, it should still be possible for him to make an intelligent guess as to what was within the vat. Based on the first flaw, the seal could only be used to seal non-living objects. This meant that what was within was not a life form. Even if it was, it would have to be dead by now. As for the second flaw, it stated that the seal had weak defenses and one could easily destroy it with Sword Qi. Since that was the case, it was safe to assume that what was within the vat was not too valuable. Otherwise, considering the ordinary material of the vat and the fact that the seal could be easily destroyed, it would be a little too negligent to store it within the vat. And the third flaw. Zhongxian's mind whirred into action as he swiftly narrowed the scope of his deduction. A moment later, he could not help but shake his head. Even if he were to narrow down the possible choices through the flaws of the seal, there were still way too many items that could have been in the vat. There was no way to come to a conclusive deduction just through this. If I can't even deduce it despite knowing the flaws, how did the previous candidates possessing the Eye of Insight manage to clear this test? Zhongxian frowned in bewilderment. Since he was able to see the invisible trails of others to locate their whereabouts, it meant that he had already reached the third realm of the Eye of Insight. However, despite having achieved this realm, he was still unable to tell what was within the vat. Since that was the case, shouldn't the others who were at the same realm in terms of Eye of Insight have been unable to discern what was within the vat too? But if they were unable to discern what was in the vat, how did they clear the test? While Zhongxian was still stressed out over the matter, he suddenly heard Sage Kuei's voice. "Time's up. How is it? Were you able to find what's stored within?" "Elder, I was only able to deduce that the vat is likely to be used to store some kind of fluid. As for what it is and what it does, I'm afraid that I can't tell at all." Zhongxian had thought that with his prowess, he would be able to clear the test with ease. Yet, who would have thought that he ended up suffering such a huge setback instead? His face could not help but redden in embarrassment. On the other hand, Sage Kuei's eyes widened for a brief moment before swiftly reverting back to normal. With a composed tone, he asked, "Is there any underlying basis behind your deduction?" "This golden inscription seal can only be used to seal fluids," Zhongxian replied. "You are able to comprehend the golden inscription seal?" This time, Sage Kuei was no longer able to conceal his astonishment. "I'm afraid that I am unable to comprehend it. I was only able to deduce that from deciphering the aura that it emanates," Zhongxian said. "Yuan, you are right. What's stored within the vat is indeed a type of fluid. Also, putting aside those who have achieved the third realm in the Eye of Insight, even those who have reached the fourth realm would be unable to tell what's inside the vat," Sage Kuei revealed with a satisfied look on his face. In truth, this test serves to assess not one's eye of discernment but one's character and nature. The eye of insight can always be cultivated, so it doesn't matter whether you have reached the third realm or not. However, character and nature are two aspects that are very hard to change. The Sanctum of Sages houses Kong Shi's ideology and my teacher's heritage, so I don't wish to pass it down to those with malicious intentions. The reason I said earlier that only those whose eye of insight has reached the third realm are qualified to become a candidate in line for the position of Sanctum Head and have you observe this vat was to assess your reaction. If one is unable to determine what's inside the vat, so be it. To lie out of anxiety to clear a test only shows that one's character is questionable. At which, Sage Kuei chuckled. Congratulations, you have cleared the test. It's admirable that someone as young as you is willing to admit failure graciously. It seems like you are a person of good character. Not bad, not bad. Thank you, Zhongxian said with a reddened face. It turned out that it was a test after all. Indeed, if one was unable to discern anything, there was no reason one could not just admit to it. Even so, the other party's words about him being of good character were indeed true. Otherwise, why would he have been unanimously chosen to become the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? Just with that remark alone, Zhongxian immediately felt a burst of goodwill toward Sage Kuei. For some inexplicable reason, everyone else seemed to tightly hold onto the belief that he was an existence who brought destruction wherever he went, and they tried to maintain a distance from him. Only the old man before him was able to see through his good character with a single glance. As expected of a grand student of Kong Shi, his eye of discernment was indeed outstanding. Since you have cleared my test, here is your reward. It's the Sanctum Head token of the Sanctum of Sages. With a flick of his wrist, Sage Kuei passed a token over to Zhongxian. The token is real, but it has been sealed by some inscriptions, so you won't be able to use it for the time being. As a result, you won't be able to issue commands through it, and you won't enjoy the authority and privileges that come along with it. In other words, despite having the Sanctum Head token in your hand, you'll still be an ordinary student in the Sanctum of Sages. Nodding, Zhongxian caught the Sanctum Head token. Taking a look at it, the token was not big. It was filled with inscriptions, which sealed the aura of the token tightly within. To the eye of an outsider, it would appear to be nothing more than an ordinary token. However, just by grasping it, one would be able to feeling the raging power harnessed within it. It felt as if there was some immense energy stored within the token that would cause even the sky to dull before its powers. This token is probably a really high-tier artifact. Even without checking on it with his Library of Heaven's Path, Zhongxian could tell that the token was no ordinary tool. In terms of tier, it was definitely superior to the Lingshu sword of the old sword maestro. I didn't seal the token to intentionally make things difficult for you. You should be well aware of the standing of the Sanctum of Sages in the Master Teacher continent. In order to become the Sanctum Head, it's imperative that you wield strength proportionate to your position. Otherwise, how will others be willing to follow you? Even if your position is legitimate, you still won't be able to gain the respect of others. Hearing those words, Zhongxian nodded slowly. While the Master Teacher Pavilion did establish a certain degree of order via rules to the Master Teacher continent, the fact was that strength still reigned mighty. The reason the Zhong clan wielded such great authority, which even the Master Teacher Pavilion would falter before, was due to their overwhelming strength. Even if Zhongxian rose to the position of the Sanctum Head right now, if he did not possess strength worthy of the position, no one would be willing to follow him. On the contrary, it might even bring danger upon him. Considering how he was only at primordial spirit realm pinnacle, there was a good chance that this would only make him a laughingstock. I'm glad that you understand that. Alright, I have set 3 seals in total upon the Sanctum Head token. The first seal will be broken when you become an 8-star Master Teacher. The second seal will be broken when your cultivation reaches Saint 8 Dan. Last but not least, the third seal will be broken when your cultivation of the Eye of Insight reaches the 4th realm, Demon Vanquisher. Sage Kuei looked at Zhongxian with eyes filled with anticipation as he continued. Judging from your appearance, you should only be your early 20s at the moment. Given how you are able to wield such strength at your current age, there's no doubt that you possess outstanding talent. While these 3 goals will be hard to achieve, as long as you work diligently, you should be able to accomplish it within 100 years. At just 120 years old, you will be one of the youngest to become the head of the Sanctum of Sages. 100 years. Hearing those words, Zhongxian could not help but shake his head. While the 3 conditions that Sage Kuei had imposed for him were indeed difficult, if he could only accomplish them within 100 years, he would already be buried under a huge pile of grass thanks to the innate fetal poison. Not to mention, if he wanted to stop Luo Ruoxin from marrying that hateful fellow from the Zhong clan, he would have to wield sufficient strength to stand before both the Luo clan and the Zhong clan by the 3rd month of the next year. He was not going to survive that long at that pace. I'll just repeat it one last time. Until you fulfill those 3 conditions, you won't be able to release the seal on the Sanctum Head token, and you won't be able to tap into the power harnessed in it. As such, I hope that you can disguise yourself as an ordinary student and study diligently in the Sanctum of Sages, slowly taking a step at a time to the peak. This is the best way for you to win the respect of others, as well as my test to you, Sage Kuei advised. I understand. Zhongxian nodded. 2 words, low profile. By walking every step of the way by himself, he would be able to gain a true understanding of the Sanctum of Sages. This way, when he finally became the Sanctum Head, he would be able to take control of matters with ease instead of falling into a panic. Good. Alright, this is the optic art that my teacher has created, Divine Eyes of the 9th Netherworld. Only those who possesses the Eye of Insight will be able to practice it. As the saying goes, once one cultivates it to the highest level, one will be able to peer right into the 9th Netherworld. Even the heavens will be unable to conceal one's eyes. I'll impart the technique to you right now, and you have 3 days to practice it. As for how much you manage to learn, that will be dependent on your own talent. If you can't comprehend it your entire life, you won't be able to reach the 4th realm of the Eye of Insight. In other words, even with the Sanctum Head token in hand, you won't be able to become the real Sanctum Head. Sage Kuei waved his hand forward. Voila! A huge number of words along with a massive formation map appeared in the space before Sage Kuei. Divine Eyes of the 9th Netherworld. Swiftly glancing through the content, Zhongxian felt his heart jolting in astonishment. As expected of an ultimate technique on par with the heavenly art of Dimension Unravel, it was indeed formidable. Just as Sage Kuei had said, the optic technique was built upon the foundation of the Eye of Insight, so only those who possessed the gift would be able to practice and utilize it. Basically, the underlying idea behind it was to make use of the lines of insight within the Eye of Insight to form formations. The more lines of insight one had, the more capable one would be in seeing through the essence of objects, and the greater prowess the divine eyes of the 9th Netherworld would wield. This optic art consists of 3 realms. The first realm is gaze of deities and demons. With just one look, one would be able to crush the mental state of a cultivator, rendering them incapable of fighting against one. Zhongxian noted as he looked at the first realm. There were some formidable cultivators who carried a unique disposition of their own. With just a glare, they would be able to instill deep fear into others. This was especially so for emperors. With a glare and a roar, those who had never experienced life-and-death situations would find themselves being put under deep pressure. Basically, the first realm, gaze of deities and demons, served to maximize such an ability to its very limits via the Eye of Insight. With just one look, one's enemies would feel as if they were standing before deities and demons alike, crushing their spirit entirely, rendering them incapable of retaliating at all. Once one's spirit had been crushed, no matter how powerful one was, there would be no chance at victory at all. To be able to induce others to flee with just one look. As expected of the technique left behind by the founder, it was indeed formidable. If he could master it, his fighting prowess would surely grow by at least 2-fold. With such thoughts in mind, Zhongxian continued looking on. But before long, a deep frown appeared on his forehead. That's not right. It seems like there's something wrong with the optic art. Chapter 1297. Are you suffering from achromatopsia? Out of habit, Zhongxian collected the manual of the Divine Eyes of the 9th Netherworld into the Library of Heaven's Path before browsing through it. So, what he was reading wasn't the text in the sky but the compiled book in the Library of Heaven's Path. The introduction still sounded fine, But when he began processing the formula to practicing the optic art, he swiftly realized that something was amiss with the technique. "What's wrong?" Sage Kuei asked. The optic art was created by his teacher, and it was incomparably profound. There was no genius possessing the eye of insight who wouldn't be mesmerized by it. Yet, the young man actually frowned and said that there was a problem. What did he mean by this? Zhong Xian turned over to look at Sage Kuei. "Elder, I would like to ask if there's anyone amidst the preceding sanctum heads who have suffered from blindness." Blindness? Not comprehending the reason behind Zhong Xian's words, Sage Kuei frowned. "I am only in charge of guiding and assessing the potential candidates for the position of sanctum head, so I don't really know much about their affairs." He had died several dozen millenniums ago, and in order to allow his fragmented soul to survive as long as possible, he would only regain consciousness if a genius perceived to possess the eye of insight were to enter the examination grounds. Considering the limited time that he remained conscious, it was difficult for him to find out much about the affairs of the other sanctum heads. Then, "Pardon me for asking this insolent question, but was ancient sage Bo Shong's eyes fine?" Seeing that he was unaware of the matter, Zhong Xian rephrased his question once more. "My teacher has departed from the world shortly after founding the Sanctum of Sages, and his eyes were indeed blind then." Sage Kuei paused for a brief moment before adding, "However, with appropriate treatment, I think that his condition should be reversible." Reversible? Hearing those words, Zhong Xian unwittingly shook his head as a bitter smile emerged on his lips. "I'm afraid that it'll be extremely difficult to do so, if not impossible altogether." "Why?" Slightly surprised by Zhong Xian's affirmative response, Sage Kuei asked. There were many books containing details about ancient sage Bo Shong's affairs in the Sanctum of Sages, but most of them were centered around the nobler and more positive aspects of him. Furthermore, it was only known in a very small, closed circle that he had lost his sight back then, so the news didn't spread too far. So, how did the young man learn of the matter? Not to mention, to speak so affirmatively that it was nearly impossible to recover from his blindness. The reason lies in the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. Zhong Xian sighed. The optic art serves to tap into one's potential through the eye of insight to unleash devastating might. In terms of prowess, it is indeed an incredible battle technique. However, the side effect is that each time the formation map was activated, it would inflict tremendous, irreparable damage to the eye. As time goes by, one would inevitably lose one's sense of sight. In fact, the very first flaw regarding the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld in the Library of Heaven's Path was the permanent loss of sight. Regardless of whether one was an ordinary mortal or a cultivator, there was bound to be a limit to one's potential. The ability of the optic art in tapping into this potential in the form of formation maps was indeed formidable, capable of bringing forth great destruction in an instant. However, the damage that it would inflict on the caster was immense and irreversible too. This was especially so since a human's potential couldn't be restored with any pills or means. To make an analogy, this was just like how, in Zhong Xian's previous life, a significant portion of talented athletes tended to have short lives. This was because they had sapped the potential of their bodies dry when they were younger. On top of that, the injuries they had sustained throughout the course of their career also remained as traumas, placing a great strain on their bodies. As a result, very few of them were able to enjoy the lifespan of an ordinary human. What the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld drained was the optic nerves. It was possible to treat and change the eyes, but if one's optic nerves were to wither and die, there would be very little that one could do. In other words, the optic art was fatally flawed. To Saint Realm cultivators, who possessed extraordinary senses and spiritual perception, it might seem like the loss of sight might not impede their fighting prowess significantly. However, the same couldn't be said about those who possessed the eye of insight. In the first place, even without practicing optic arts, the eye of insight was already a very powerful gift in itself. The very ability to discern details more keenly than anyone else could play a deterministic role in the outcome of a battle. The loss of sight would mean the loss of this gift, which would result in a sharp decline in one's fighting prowess. On top of that, one might also suffer a huge setback in their state of mind as well, and that would prevent them from reaching greater heights in the future. Hearing the young man's helpless sigh, Sage Kuei frowned in displeasure. I have practiced the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld for several hundred years now, but I haven't noticed any damage to my eyes. This is an optic art left behind my teacher, so I'll have to ask of you not to spread false rumors about it. It was not that Sage Kuei was reluctant to believe Zhongxian's words, but he had also cultivated the optic art for many years, but his eyes were still completely fine. He didn't experience any discomfort or pain as a result from using the technique, and his eyesight hadn't been impaired either. Given so, wasn't the other party's worries a little unfounded? Besides, who was his teacher? Ancient sage Bo Shong, one of the Kongsha's direct disciples, honored as one of the 10 apostles. The divine eyes of the ninth netherworld was a technique which ancient sage Bo Shong had devoted his entire life to developing, so how could there be such a fatal flaw to it? This was a ridiculous notion in itself. Even if there was a flaw in it, it shouldn't be something which a mere primordial spirit realm cultivator like the young man would be able to see through. Knowing that Sage Kuei would react in such a way, Zhongxian didn't lose his composure. Instead, he looked at the latter and said calmly, "Why don't I put it like that then? Elder, you mentioned that you have cultivated the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld for several hundred years now, but if I'm not mistaken, you weren't able to reach the third realm, right?" "Yes." Sage Kuei nodded. Due to his lack of talent, despite his hard work, he was still unable to catch up with his teacher's footsteps even up to his teacher's death. Putting aside the third realm, he wasn't even able to reach the peak of the second realm. If I'm not mistaken, when you first left this fragment of your soul here, you have just used the inferno to reforge your eyes and the frigid ice to temper them, allowing you to barely reach the second realm of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. At your current level, you are already able to see through the darkness with absolute keenness, as if it's a brightly lit room. However, in a real battle, you still aren't able to use the true prowess of the second realm, Azura's wrath, right? Raising his eyelids, Zhongxian said. The first realm of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld was gaze of deities and demons, and the second realm was Azura's wrath. Once one had mastered the second realm, with just a glance, one would be able to bring scorching inferno to the lands, as if hell had descended upon the world. The first realm was mainly focused on mental offense, whereas the second realm was a pure physical offense. Those whose strength hadn't met a certain mark would stand no chance before Azura's wrath at all, turning into cinders in an instant. Even those who possessed strength greater than the caster would find themselves placed in a very difficult position, unable to exert their strength freely as they wanted to. Most importantly of all, the optic art could be cast at will. There would be no movements or anything else to warn one of the offense beforehand. Everything within the reach of the eye were possible targets, making it nigh impossible to guard against it. It was for this reason that the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld was so famous, and the generations of sanctum heads were also deeply respected throughout the continent, possessing a standing higher than even that of the heads of the Zhong clan and the Luo clan. However, as powerful as the technique was, it was extremely troublesome to cultivate it. Firstly, one had to reforge one's eyes with the inferno and use frigid ice to temper them. After which, one still had to go through many gruesome trials, and the slightest mistake in any of them could result in the cultivation of the Eye of Insight to fall through. Even though Sage Kuei hadn't executed any optic art so far, through Zhongxian's understanding of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld, he was still able to roughly deduce the latter's proficiency. "How did you know?" Sage Kuei was astonished. The other party's words were completely spot on. When he first left behind a fragment of his soul in the mountain gate, he had barely managed to cultivate the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld up to the second realm, still a very far way off from reaching the third realm. "Even though you are just a sliver of will at the moment, I can still see slight flames burning in your eyes. As weak as they appear, they seem to wield the potency to torch everything down to cinders. From that, it isn't too difficult to deduce that you have reached the second realm, Azura's wrath," Zhongxian said as he leisurely strolled around the other party. Since he had collected the manual of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld into the library of Heaven's Path, it took only a moment for him to assimilate all of the knowledge concerning it. With his current understanding of the optic art, it wasn't too difficult for him to deduce this much. "Are you saying that? You have already finished reading through the second realm of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld? Hearing those words, Sage Kuei's body trembled in astonishment, and his eyes widened in shock. It was just a moment ago that he had shown the manual of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld to the young man, but in just a few breaths' time, the young man was actually able to accurately list out the various distinctive traits of the second realm. Could it be that he had really managed to memorize all of it? One must know that the manual of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld consisted of over several 100,000 words. Just browsing through it would take some time, let alone assimilating the knowledge. Back then, he had studied it day and night without rest after obtaining the manual, but it still took him 2 days before he managed to primarily grasp the optic art. He even received his teacher's compliment for that. And yet, the young man actually managed to memorize it all within just a few breaths. How could that be possible? It isn't too difficult to memorize the entire optic art. What's more important is interpreting and cultivating the technique. Zhongxian shook his head. He didn't reveal the slightest joy at having astounding the other party. On the contrary, he shook his head in pity as he continued on, correct me if I'm wrong, but while cultivating the second realm, Azura's wrath, you should have seen red dots in your eyes from time to time. Also, there would be a slight itch in your eyes from time to time, and upon facing the wind, your eyes would tear up uncontrollably too. Worst of all, after casting Azura's wrath, you would find yourself in a state of temporary blindness for roughly 3 breaths. May I know if there's any mistake in what I have said so far? Sage Kuei couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had indeed faced these conditions while he was cultivating the divine eyes of the ninth underworld, but back then, he thought that it was just a side effect from reforging his eyes with the Inferno, so he didn't think too much into it. Could there really be something wrong with the optic art? By the time he reached the second realm of the optic art, his teacher had already departed from the world, so there was no one whom he could consult these issues with. As a result, he could only fumble his way forward, hoping that he would be able to find the right path. It was also true that he would suffer temporary blindness after casting Azura's wrath, but he thought that it was a natural effect as a result of the excessive exertion of his strength in the casting of the optic art. Could it really be, as the young man had said, there was really a problem in the optic art? Azura's wrath uses the eyes as a medium to channel a raging inferno upon one's enemies. Upon reaching major accomplishment, the flames would be able to cleanse all impurities and torch everything down into cinders. Without a doubt, it's a technique that wields astounding might, but it's highly exhausting on one's mind as well. Continued usage of the skill would cause the nerves that governed sight to age prematurely, thus significantly reducing the lifespan of one's sight. This is just like how the core of a formation plate would be depleted each time it's used. Once it reaches its limit, not even the most formidable of formation masters would be able to fix it. Zhongxian shook his head in pity as he continued, even though you have barely reached the second realm by the time you left this sliver of will, the side effects have already started to show. For one, the immense strain on your eyes has resulted in the enlarging of blood vessels in your eyes, resulting in them appearing slightly red. Also, if I'm not mistaken, you should suffer from frequent insomnia too. You know that. I have insomnia. Sage Kuei was flabbergasted. For a cultivator as strong as Sage Kuei, he could use cultivation to replace his need for sleep. Nevertheless, an occasional sleep now and then would still be a relaxing experience for both his body and mind. In fact, most cultivators would still opt to rest from time to time. Back then, when his teacher just departed from the world, he had to govern the entire sanctum of sages by himself, so he didn't have time to get much rest. Even when he tried, he wasn't able to fall asleep either. He had attributed the matter to his tense nerves, but could it really be related to the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld? Now that he thought about it, he seemed to recall that his teacher suffered from constant insomnia as well, and that had left him feeling lethargic frequently. Considering the damage the cultivation of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld has caused to your nerves, it's inevitable that you would suffer from insomnia. Furthermore, as you deepen your mastery in it, your mind would start to wear down, resulting in frequent memory loss. More importantly, your sensitivity toward colors would also start to dull, and eventually, the many colors of the natural world would appear to be nothing more than black and white to you. At this moment, Zhongxian paused for a moment before sighing deeply in sympathy. In other words, total color blindness. If I'm not mistaken, you should be suffering from such symptoms too. Chapter 1298 Sage Kuei's Dilemma. Due to the inferno burning within one's eyes, those who practiced the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld would find their sensitivity toward colors fading as time passed, and eventually, the entire world would appear to be nothing but black and white to them. Due to the nature of the injury, it was an irreversible symptom. There was no way to recover from it. This was not listed in the flaws in the Library of Heaven's Path, but through Zhongxian's deep understanding of the way of medicine and cultivation, he could still deduce this much from working backward. Color blindness? What's that? Sage Kuei was stunned by the foreign term. He had never heard that terminology from anyone's mouth before. You don't know what it is? Zhongxian was startled for a moment before realization struck him. Due to the difference in worlds, it was indeed possible that the notion of color blindness was not as prevalent or common in this world. So, Zhongxian pondered for a moment to decide how he should explain the concept. Color blindness refers to a lack of sensitivity of one's eyes in perceiving different colors. Take my clothes for example. What's the color that you see? Gray, Sage Kuei replied. It's light blue, not gray, Zhongxian stated with a shake of his head. Light blue? Sage Kuei frowned. Is this supposed to be what light blue looks like? Why doesn't it seem to be the case? Let me ask you a different question instead. How many colors are there in a rainbow? While saying those words, Zhongxian waved his hand and created a rainbow bridge of 7 colors in the sky. I can discern a couple of colors from it, but there doesn't seem to be 7 colors in the rainbow you have created. Furthermore, most of the colors are of similar tones, so I can't really say for sure either. Staring at the rainbow intently, Sage Kuei felt a ripple of shock striking his mind. He had seen plenty of rainbows when he was younger, and he could accurately distinguish 7 colors from them. But now, he could only identify 3 colors in total, and the difference between the 3 was very vague. Could he really have been suffering from color blindness, just as the other party had said? Was this really the side effect from practicing the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld that his teacher had left behind? For so many years, he had harbored absolute faith toward the optic art that his teacher had created. However, under the persuasive and logical analysis of the young man before him, he could not help but begin doubting. Then, is there a way to resolve the problem? Sage Kuei asked. So far, I only managed to analyze the flaws in the optic art. I haven't really found a way to resolve them yet. Zhongxian shook his head. The Library of Heaven's Path would only reflect the flaws of techniques, and Zhongxian had not come into contact with any optic art manuals before, so he could not compile anything with the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld to perfect it. However, since we have identified the problem, it will only be a matter of time before a solution is found. As long as Zhongxian could find sufficient optic art manuals to perfect the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld, those problems would be resolved as well. Back then, there had also been many faults with ancient sage Qiu Wu's heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm, and cultivation of the technique could have caused one to go blind, too. Nevertheless, through compiling it with many other cultivation techniques, he had resolved that problem. Let's hope so. Sage Kuei nodded. So, will you still be cultivating the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld? Sage Kuei knew how powerful the Eye of Insight was as well, and it would indeed a pity to go blind as a result of cultivating an optic art. I think I'll hold off cultivating the technique for the time being. I'll try to resolve the current problems before cultivating it, Zhongxian replied. Despite its flaws, the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld was still an extremely formidable battle technique. He would have to find some way to access optic art manuals so as to compile them together with it and perfect it. In any case, there was no rush for the time being. What he was lacking in the most at the moment was not battle techniques but his cultivation. If his cultivation was too low, no matter how many formidable battle techniques he had, he would still be unable to phase the Zhong clan and the Luo clan. Yuan, that would be good, too. For the next 3 days, you should try to gain a complete understanding of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. If there's anything that you are unable to comprehend, feel free to ask me. You won't have any more opportunities to clarify your doubts once you leave this land in 3 days. Sage Kuei nodded. Thank you, Elder. Zhongxian replied before sitting on the ground. While he appeared to be staring at the words in the air, his consciousness was immersed within his mind as he tried to fully grasp everything concerning the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. There are more than 30 flaws to the optic art all in all, and every single one of them poses great damage to the body. After a moment of studying the optic art, Zhongxian rubbed his glabella helplessly. It was not that he did not want to cultivate the technique, but there were simply too many flaws in it. How could a perfectionist like him possibly swallow something like this? If he forced himself to cultivate it, he might very well die from repulsion before anything else. Seeing that Zhongxian had paused on the spot for some time now, Sage Kuei asked with a kind smile, "How is it? Is there anything concerning the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld that confuses you? I can address your doubts here." Knowing that Sage Kuei was asking out of goodwill, Zhongxian hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. "There are quite a few aspects of the optic art that confuse me, but it's fine. I don't think that you'll be able to address them either." It was not that he was underestimating Sage Kuei, but it was likely that even ancient sage Bo Shong himself would have been unable to address his doubt. Otherwise, there was no way he would have ended up blinding himself. "You are saying that I won't be able to address your doubts?" Sage Kuei frowned in displeasure. "I've spent several centuries cultivating the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld, even reaching the second realm of it. As long as it's a problem regarding its cultivation, I'll surely be able to answer it." He knew that the young man before him possessed an exceptional eye of discernment, being able to notice such a major flaw in the optic art with just one look. Nevertheless, he had still cultivated the technique for many years now, and not to mention, he was also a powerful cultivator. He was confident that with his deep understanding of the battle technique, he would be able to address any questions that the young man could come up with. "You'll surely be able to answer it." Seeing the confident look on Sage Kuei's face, Zhongxian turned his gaze over and smiled lightly. "Very well, I do have a few questions that I would love to have some answers to. I would be very grateful if you can answer them. Firstly, in the gaze of deities and demons, what is the exact form that the demons and deities should assume? If it's just based on personal conceptualization, won't the effectiveness of the optic art be compromised?" Sage Kuei was startled by the abrupt question. In this world, there was no one who had seen a true deity or demon before, so naturally, they were beings that were extremely hard for any human to truly imagine. In fact, whenever Sage Kuei cast the technique, he would instinctively attempt to image bloodshed and carnage, intending to use killing aura as a substitution for the conceptualization of deities and demons to instill fear in the hearts of others. Just as Sage Kuei was about to reveal his method, the young man before him had already spoken up once more. "If what we are going to image is just plain slaughter, once the killing intent corrodes one's eyes and consciousness, how would one be different from the otherworldly demons? Furthermore, what demons and deities stand for should be supremacy, not slaughter. If we use slaughter to replace the concept of supremacy, wouldn't that be an inaccurate interpretation of the technique?" Hearing those words, Sage Kuei's face turned pale. Indeed. As a result of his frequent conceptualization of bloodshed and carnage, there was a period of time when he found himself unable to control the killing intent within him anymore, and he ran all the way down to the subterranean gallery to slaughter otherworldly demons to vent his emotions. In a sense, using the slaughter to substitute the demons and deities would turn the technique into a depraved art, which was at odds with the standing and beliefs of a master teacher. My second question. Seeing that Sage Kuei was unable to answer his first question, Zhongxian decisively decided to move on. The gaze of deities and demons utilizes one's eyes as a medium to attack another's soul. However, for the attack to reach its target, one must first absorb a hint of the target's soul energy in order to lock the attack onto the other party's primordial spirit. However, if the target is aware of this aspect of the technique, they could use it as an opportunity to overwhelm one with their soul energy, putting one in a perilous position. Taking a step back, even if the target isn't aware of this opening, if the target's primordial spirit is far stronger than one's own, a forceful attack would inflict significant damage upon one. Sage Kuei fell silent, unable to speak a single word at all. This was another flaw of the gaze of deities and demons, and even his teacher, ancient sage Bo Shong, had been unable to resolve it. But while this was indeed a potential opening, considering the fast pace of a battle, there would be very few people who would be able to notice it and use it against them. As such, it could not be considered a major flaw. Just that, since the other party had pointed it out, it would not feel right to say that it was a negligible flaw. My third question. In order to cultivate Azura's wrath, one must use the inferno to reforge one's eyes and the frigid ice to temper them. Through the intersection of hot and cold, one will be able to form a balance of duality within one's eyes, which is aligned with the nature of the world as well. However, while two contrasting powers in one's eyes can enhance the strength of the formation maps and strengthen the lines of insight, it will also suppress the strength of one's soul as well, reminiscent of a seal. This will inadvertently result in the weakening of one's primordial spirit. My fourth question. Zhong Xian posed all his questions one after another. With each question asked, Sage Kuei's face turned paler by a shade. By the time the 10th question was asked, his silhouette had already turned faint, and it seemed as if he would vanish at any moment. At this point, he was no longer shocked but horrified. While the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld was created by his teacher, it was inevitable that it would have its own flaws as well. Nevertheless, under normal circumstances, these flaws were not too apparent, so they would not cause much of a problem in its execution. Yet, with just a single glance, the young man was able to see through all of these flaws, reciting them one after another precisely. If the young man had been an enemy, with just this knowledge, the young man would have been able to overcome his optic art easily and blind him with a single move. The realization of this made Sage Kuei break out in cold sweat. He had thought that after learning the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld, there would be hardly anyone in the world who would be a match for him. In any battle, as long as he utilized the optic art, he would be guaranteed victory. But after hearing the young man's words, he realized that the only reason he had remained undefeated for so long was because he had never encountered a true expert. If he had encountered an enemy of the young man's caliber back then, it was questionable whether he would still have his eyes with him at this moment. As the saying goes, the most proficient of swimmers can drown in water. Complacency would eventually bite back at one. He was able to discern so many flaws with just a look, and I was actually tried to offer him guidance. Sage Kuei's body stiffened. He felt so stifled that he could not even speak a word. It was just a moment ago that he had declared confidently that he would offer the young man guidance, but as soon as the young man started stating his questions, he found that he could not even answer a single one of them. The searing sensation on his face left him feeling like burying himself in a hole. This is my 13th question. Never mind, I'll just stop here today. Elder, have you thought of the answers of any of them? There was a momentary silence before the young man spoke with a comforting voice. There's no need to rush into it, you can slowly take your time to ponder over them. In any case, we still have 2 days more here. For the time being, I'll take a sleep first. Feel free to wake me up when you're done, and I'll continue asking the other questions I have in mind. Cough cough. Sage Kuei's lips twitched wildly as his silhouette faltered. This was supposed to be a session to clarify doubts, but why did it seem like the young man was assessing him instead? More importantly, he knew that there was no way he could come up with a fitting answer to those questions. Putting aside him, even his teacher would have been unable to do so. If his teacher was really able to answer these questions, he would have improved the divine eye of the 9th netherworld already. Given so, there was no way he would be able to answer those questions even if he were to ponder over them for 2 years, let alone 2 days. The reason he had left behind a sliver of his will was to assess the later generations, but now, he found himself being stumped before them instead. Just where in the world did this monster came from? After contemplating for some time and deciding that there was no way he would be able to answer any of the questions, Sage Kuei could only turn his gaze back to the young man helplessly. However, what he saw was the young man deeply asleep on the ground instead. Saliva was dripping down from his opened mouth, and there was a sweet smile on his face, as if he was having a good dream. Are you the first-generation Sanctum head, or am I? Sage Kuei's vision immediately turned dark. The sheer frustration that he felt left his very existence faltering non-stop, as if he would dissipate at any moment. Chapter 1299. End of the examination. Over the past several 10,000 years, he had assessed 8 candidates possessing the eye of insight, and every single one of them expressed deep reverence toward him, not daring to show the slightest disrespect. Their wonderment and awe only served to deepen when they saw the manual of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. Every single one of them swore to cultivate strictly to the manual, and some even feared that their lack of talent would taint such a brilliant optic art. Yet, this fellow actually managed to stump him after a swift look at the manual, and as if that wasn't enough, he actually went to sleep right before him. You are obviously biting tightly onto the fact that I won't be able to answer your questions. Deeply stifled, Sage Kuei shook his head before sitting helplessly onto the ground. Staring at the optic art manual before him, he eventually began to reanalyze it once more. Even though he felt a little unhappy about the young man's casual attitude before him, he knew that the young man's words rang true. Just the fact that the young man could pose those questions to him meant that the young man's comprehension of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld had already reached a level on par with his. If a cultivator were to find flaws in the technique he practiced, it went without saying that he would have to find ways to resolve them. Otherwise, if he were to harbor doubts about the capability of the battle technique he practiced, how could he possibly charge valiantly toward the top? Some time later, Zhongxian stretched his back lazily and opened his eyes. Ever since he arrived at Qianchong Empire, he had been constantly preoccupied with various matters. Even on the way to the Sanctum of Sages, he was completely absorbed into studying, raising his cultivation, and guiding Zhong Zhouxiao along. As a result, a great deal of mental fatigue had been building up in him for some time now. Perhaps in view of the fact that they were currently in the Mountain Gate examination, and Sage Kuei was looking after him, Zhongxian instinctively realized that there wouldn't be any problem regarding his safety here. As such, he was able to release whatever wariness he had toward his surroundings and slept rather sweetly. It has been almost 3 days. Standing up and stretching his back lazily, Zhongxian did a rough calculation of the time he had been out, and he couldn't help but leap in shock. He thought that he would only sleep for a day at most, but who could have thought that he would end up being knocked out for 3 days straight? Just the thought of it left him deeply embarrassed. Perhaps it was the great stress he had been under recently, he hadn't been able to get a good rest. As such, when his tension finally loosened, his mind took this opportunity to rest as much as it could without any concern about time. Has Sage Kuei resolved the problems which I have posed to him yet? Zhongxian suddenly recalled what happened prior to his sleep, and he turned his gaze towards Sage Kuei. To his shock, he found that the old man's body had already turned significantly less corporeal, as if he would dissipate at any moment. On top of that, his eyes were crimson, and there was an indescribably aged look on his face. It was as if he had depleted all of his vitality, spirit, and energy in the past 3 days. What's wrong with you? Zhongxian was horrified by the sight before him. Before he went to his sleep, Sage Kuei was still doing perfectly fine. Why would he suddenly change so much after a short span of 3 days? You are finally awake. Turning his gaze to Zhongxian, Sage Kuei's face unwittingly reddened in embarrassment. With a distressed and helpless look in his eyes, he said, I have pondered over the questions you have asked for 3 days. And I really can't find an answer to them. He thought that he should at least resolve one of the questions posed within the next 3 days so as to preserve his honor, but it seemed like he had overestimated himself. The deeper he pondered over those questions, the less confidence he found that he had in the optic art. At this point, he was already severely doubting if the way he had chosen was wrong right from the very start. Zhongxian was still wondering what kind of earth-shattering incident had occurred while he was in his sleep when he heard those words. Heaving a sigh of relief, he consoled, It's fine that you can't find an answer to them, there's no need to take it to heart. It'll do as long as you keep a lookout for these problems when you practice the technique in the future. Sage Kuei felt even more stifled inside. Why did it feel like he was the student here? The duration of the examination is 3 days, so is it about time for me to leave now? Zhongxian swiftly glanced at his surroundings and noted that he was still in the folded space. Then, a thought suddenly struck him, and he looked at Sage Kuei in alarm. What about my points? While the other candidates were busy trying to get as many points as they could, he actually slept through all 3 days. Was he going to fail the examination because of that? Wait a moment, I'll get you some points now. Sage Kuei replied awkwardly. He had been too busy pondering over the young man's question that he forgot about this matter. It would really be the greatest joke of the world if the future Sanctum head couldn't even qualify as a student in the Sanctum of Sages. For the past 8 Sanctum head candidates, while the candidates were busy studying and comprehending the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld, he would gradually add their points so as to ensure that no one would be able to notice that something was amiss with their results. However, the overwhelming trauma he had suffered this time around had caused him to completely forget about this matter. He quickly tapped his finger, and a moment later, he said, "All right. You should have enough points to enter the elite division now. Thank you." Hearing those words, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. At this point, he had also roughly realized what was going on here. While the previous Sanctum head candidates wouldn't sleep through the 3 days like he did, they would still be preoccupied with studying the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld, so they wouldn't have any time to head out to earn points either. Most likely, they were only able to become official students of the Sanctum of Sages due to Sage Kuei tampering with their points. Considering how the latter was the creator of the Mountain Gate examination, it wouldn't pose any difficulty for him to add points to a candidate. Good luck and work hard. Try to break the seals on the Sanctum head token as soon as possible so that you can become the next official head of the Sanctum of Sages. I'll be entrusting the responsibility of passing down Kong Shi's ideology and my teacher's heritage to the later generations into your hands then. Despite Sage Kuei's solemn voice, the expectant gleam in his eyes showed that he thought highly of the young man before him. There was something really different about the young man as compared to the other Sanctum head candidates he had assessed. Perhaps, he might just be able to walk out a path different from the rest of them. As difficult as the task was, he had a feeling that the young man might just be able to resolve the flaws in the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld and perfect his teacher's heritage. Rest assured. Zhongxian replied. The position of the Sanctum head meant a lot to him as an individual as well. It would prove to become an important chip for vying for Luo Ruoxin's hand in marriage, and it would also grant him the resources he would need to push for a breakthrough to 9-star master teacher before reaching his 30s. No matter what, he was determined to obtain it. Yuan Sage Kuei nodded in satisfaction before waving his hand. In the next moment, Zhongxian abruptly felt a jolt in his body, and the surroundings before him warped into nothing more than a myriad of colors. Hula! With another jolt, he suddenly found a large gate towering before him. He instinctively took a step forward, and before he knew it, he was already standing in the midst of the square before. I have returned. Blinking his eyes in confusion, Zhongxian scanned his surroundings. At this point, the students who had fought to enter the examination grounds 3 days ago seemed to have mostly returned. There were vastly different expressions on their faces, some were lit up in delight, some were dim with dejection. The results were only reflected on the Jade Tablet of Trials, so they were still unaware of whether they were qualified as candidates in the Sanctum of Sages or not. Nevertheless, they were able to make a gauge based on their performance, so most of them already had a rough idea of their own results. Zhongxian swiftly searched the surroundings for the group he had entered the Mountain Gate with. Coincidentally, in this moment, the gate behind him suddenly lit up once more, and a figure walked out. Zhong Jiuxiao. How did you fare for the examination? I'm not too sure either, but I think I shouldn't have a problem with clearing the examination, Zhong Jiuxiao said with a hint of excitement in his eyes. Oh, what's your test? To be able to remain confident despite the strong competition, just what could Zhong Jiuxiao's test be? Swordsmanship. I have already achieved the level of half quintessence, and I have also grasped the basics of the 3 swords of Lingshu too. While it's still a little lacking at the moment, I think that there shouldn't be too many candidates who would be able to match my level of proficiency. Zhong Jiuxiao replied confidently. On their journey from Qianchong Empire to the Sanctum of Sages, Zhongxian had imparted him the essence of swordsmanship, inducing a massive leap in his comprehension of the sword, and he successfully made a breakthrough to half quintessence. Together with his grasp over the 3 swords of Lingshu, even Ma Minghai, who was famed for superior mastery in swordsmanship, wouldn't be a match for him. Given so, It was indeed not too difficult for him to stand out from the other candidates in the field of swordsmanship. That's good. Zhongxian nodded in approval. He had spent quite a lot of effort guiding Zhong Zhouxiao along in hopes that he would be able to clear the examination, and he had seen how hard Zhong Zhouxiao had worked during this period of time as well. It was truly heartening to see that his efforts had paid off. My results should be enough for me to become a student at the Sanctum of Sages, but it doesn't seem too likely that I'll be able to get into the elite division. Zhong Zhouxiao continued. Elite division? This was the second time Zhongxian was hearing this term. He couldn't help but direct a perplexed gaze toward Zhong Zhouxiao. The elite division is the class which only the most talented students of each intake would be able to enter, and all in all, there are only 50 slots for it. Zhong Zhouxiao explained as a gleam of anticipation flickered across his eyes. Only 50? Zhongxian was astonished. With an intake of 50, it would mean that only the top 10% of the candidates who had cleared the entrance examination would be able to enter the elite division. Considering how strict the selection was, it could be seen how outstanding those who were able to get into the elite division were. Indeed, most of those who were able to get into the elite division eventually went on to take up leadership roles in their own affiliated organizations. If I could get into the elite division too, there's a good chance that my standing in the Zhong clan would rise beyond Zhongqian, Zhong Zhouxiao said in agitation. Isn't the offspring of sage clans ranked by the purity of their bloodlines? Zhongxian asked in wonder. To a large degree, yes. However, it isn't the only criterion that is assessed. There are some geniuses from the side family who, despite the lacking purity in their bloodlines, achieved spectacular accomplishments as well, and they were highly regarded in the Zhong clan too. Zhong Zhouxiao explained. There's nothing more to say about the standing of the Sanctum of Sages in the Master-Teacher continent. Putting aside how much the students in the elite division would accomplish in the future, just the connections that they could build there were already sufficient to reinforce their standing in the world. That's true. Zhongxian nodded. Those who were able to enter the elite division were mostly highly regarded geniuses from top-notch powers. Even if they failed to become the heads of their affiliated organization in the future, even at the very worst, they would still at least be able to qualify as elder. And being in the same class as those figures would allow one to forge connections with them, thus establishing a powerful network of contacts. In contrast, the ordinary division was comparatively weaker. Right, Zhongshe, how many points do you think that you have received? Were you able to calculate it? Do you think that you'll be able to get into the elite division? Zhong Zhouxiao asked curiously. He had spent a considerable amount of time with the young man so far, and if the young man were to use his full strength in the examination, there was really a good chance that he might be able to get into the elite division. But again, it was hard to say for sure. The most outstanding young geniuses of the Master-Teacher continent were all gathered on this square, and to emerge above them all was no easy feat at all. A bitter smile surfaced on Zhongxian's lips as he shook his head. To be honest, I'm not too sure either. Even though Sage Kuei said that he had given him sufficient points to enter the elite division, he still wasn't too sure how many points he had obtained. You aren't too sure? Guessing that Zhongxian might be reluctant to reveal his results, Zhong Zhouxiao decided not to press the issue any further. With a chuckle, he said, "It's fine. Our scores are being tabulated at the moment, so we should know the results of the examination very soon. If nothing went wrong, they should be able to find out whether they had managed to make it into the Sanctum of Sages by today." Yuan Zhongxian nodded. The duo swiftly found Ma Minghai and the others and made their way over. Judging from the composure on Ma Minghai and Brother Sun's face, it seemed like they should have performed not too bad. As for the others, their complexion looked a little awful, and their fidgety body posture reflected their anxiety and worry, so it was apparent that they didn't have too much confidence in their performance. It was no wonder why they would feel this way. They might be the cream of the crop in their respective clans or empires, but against the many experts from the various occupations, sage clans, and empire alliance, their halo as geniuses inevitably dimmed in comparison. I wonder how many of them will be able to get into the Sanctum of Sages. Zhongxian wondered as he glanced at the worried faces before him. The competition to reach the top was never easy, let alone in somewhere like the Sanctum of Sages. To make a metaphor, it was like thousands of cavalry charging to get across a narrow plank of wood to get to the other side. Inevitably, some might find themselves being crushed by the hordes behind or pushed down the cliff, thus being eliminated from the race. Just taking himself as an example, if not for how outstanding he was, he would have never been able to rise up through the ranks from Tianxian Kingdom, reaching where he was at the moment. Before long, all of the candidates had finally stepped out from the gates, and the rank board reflecting the scores of the top 500 candidates on the Jade Token of Trials was refreshed for the very last time. Many nervous guides stood before the greyish emerald tablet with their eyes fixated on it. Chapter 1300 Elite Division 1. With a brilliant shimmer of light, the names, ranks, and scores on the Jade Tablet of Trials were refreshed one last time. All in all, there were 500 lines of information on the screen, no more no less. Upon seeing the results, a huge commotion broke out amid the crowd. The results this time around have really broken the records. I wouldn't say that they have broken records, but it's definitely the best performance we have seen in the entrance examination for the past 30 years. The top ranker, Feng Zi, actually managed to obtain a score exceeding 70,000 points. Even the little princess of the Luo clan didn't manage to obtain such a score back then. That's only because the little princess didn't use her full strength. If she really went all out, putting aside 70,000, even 700,000 is not completely out of the question. As the one who possesses the Dimension Silencer, she commands near absolute authority over space. It's questionable whether the folded space of the Mountain Gate examination would have been able to handle her strength if she really went all out. The only one who stands a chance against the little princess of the Luo clan is the young prodigy of the Zhong clan. The surrounding master teachers discussed with one another. As guides, they had led many intakes of candidates into the Sanctum of Sages, and without a doubt, the performance of the current intake was the highest within the recent decade. The top ranker, Feng Zi, had even scored 70,000 points. That was truly a frightening accomplishment. Zhong Yu isn't too bad either. With a score of 69,000, he's only 1,000 points away from first place. I didn't think that Yuan Haiqing would be able to push up a rank at the very last refresh, obtaining the third place. Bai Qingxian isn't not too bad either. He managed to secure the fourth place. The guides commented on the top scores as they looked through the list of names on the scoreboard. Listed before them were the names of the experts who would be entering the elite division, the most talented youths in the master-teacher continent. Perhaps, several hundred years from then, those names would be spoken by countless mouths, resounding through every street and alley. Bing Lingqing and Chen Laiyao of the Glacier Plain Court have also managed to get into the elite division as well. Bing Lingqing's ranking has constantly remained between 10th and 20th throughout the examination, not too bad. As for Chen Laiyao, her ranking was around the 70s to the 80s in the first 2 days of the examination, but in the very last day, she suddenly managed to make a push into the top 50. She must have completed some kind of formidable test for her results to soar by so much. I really must say that her luck is not too bad. Indeed. Well, it's a huge pity for Zhong Qian though. He was in the top 50 throughout most of the examination, but his ranking abruptly fell through at the final juncture, disqualifying him from the elite division. They had been observing the scoreboard over the past 3 days, so they had a rough idea of how each candidate had fared throughout the course of the examination. Suddenly, someone amid the crowd exclaimed, "Wait a minute. Everyone, look at the person in 50th place, Zhong Xian. Where did he pop out from? I don't recall seeing his name on the screen throughout the examination." Everyone quickly turned their gazes over, and indeed, sitting in 50th place on the scoreboard was an extremely unfamiliar name. Zhong Xian. This name has never gotten into the top 500 throughout the course of the examination, so how could he leap up to 50th place in the final refresh? His score is 12,700. The last time I checked, the score for 500th place is 2,400. In other words, within the period before the final refresh, his score increased by more than 10,000. How is that possible? 10,000 within 2 minutes. Not even Feng Zi would be capable of something like that. Could he have cheated? Soon, voices of doubts began spreading throughout the hall. The Jade Tablet of Trials would refresh once every 2 minutes, and not once had the name Zhongxian appeared before. The fact that Zhongxian had never appeared in the top 500 meant that he had never, at any point in time, achieved a score higher than the 500th ranker's 2,400 point. Yet, for his score to surge up to 12,700 in an instant, that was too exaggerated. The 10,000 candidates had toiled for 3 whole days, but most of them did not even come close to reaching 10,000 points. Yet, that fellow actually obtained that many points within 2 minutes. Was this even humanly possible? Forming a stark contrast to the bewildered and doubtful crowd was Zhao Xingmo, who visibly heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing Zhongxian's name. That fellow sure was worrisome, leaving him on edge for the past 3 days. His heart had been restless ever since he failed to find that fellow's name on the first day, and he had thought that the young man did not stand a chance anymore. Yet, who would have thought that he would actually shoot up by 10,000 points at the very last moment, successfully clearing the entrance examination? Not to mention, he even snuck into the very last slot of the elite division at that. It sure was a thrilling ride of emotions. To him, the fact that a candidate he had brought to the Sanctum of Sages had successfully gotten into the elite division was a great source of pride and honor to him. Zhong Jiuxiao, Ma Minghai, Sun Gan. All in all, 7 of the candidates whom I have led here have successfully cleared the examination. Not bad. Zhao Xingmo nodded in approval. While it was slightly beneath expectations that only 7 out of 33 cleared the examination, considering that one of them managed to make it into the elite division, it was still not too bad. With such results, he would be qualified to head to better places to recruit more stronger candidates into the Sanctum of Sages. Similar to how most of the guides were reacting, Elder Liu also frowned in disapproval. There's something peculiar about the results. He had served as an elder in the Sanctum of Sages for a very long time now, and he had encountered plenty of geniuses in his time. However, he had never seen or heard of anyone who remotely came close to earning 10,000 points within 2 minutes before. Elder Liu pondered for a moment before he turned to the old man by his side and instructed, "Elder Han Zhu, go and check the situation." "Yes." Elder Han Zhu nodded. Elder Han Zhu quickly backed out of the hall, and not too long later, he returned with an unreadable expression on his face. Noting the peculiar expression on Elder Han Zhu's face, Elder Liu asked, "What's wrong?" "I have just checked the records, and based on what I saw, until the final refresh, Zhongxian didn't have any points at all. In other words, he earned 12,700 points at the very last moment." Elder Han Zhu replied with a frown. While the Jade Tablet of Trials only reflected the names and scores of the top 500 candidates, it still kept track of the results of the other candidates as well. Otherwise, it would not have been able to determine who had cleared the examination and who had failed it accurately. Earlier, he went to check the past records of that Zhongxian candidate, and to his shock, he realized that up till the final 2 minutes, that candidate did not have a single point. It was only when the examination was coming to an end that he suddenly leaped to the 50th place. Clearly, there was something very bizarre about the situation. He earned 12,700 points at the very last moment. Is there any test in the Mountain Gate examination that can earn that many points in a single go? Elder Liu asked contemplatively. As you know, the Mountain Gate examination was left behind by Sage Kuei, and even elders like us don't have the authority to check on what kinds of tests are within, let alone uncover the point allocation of the tests. Nevertheless, in the records of the past 100 years, the highest number of points that was allocated in one go was for deciphering a Grade 8 intermediate illusory slaughter formation, 5,000 point. At this moment, Elder Han Zhu hesitated for a moment before continuing. This record was left behind by the Zhong clan's Zhong Chen, and it caused a huge uproar then. "I know of the matter, too. 5,000 points is already unbelievable, but this Zhong Xian actually earned 12,700 points in a single go. Just what kind of test did he go through for that?" Elder Liu still found the matter a little hard to believe. There were indeed tests in the Mountain Gate examination where one could earn a great deal of points in a single shot, but those tests were proportionately difficult to pass as well. Furthermore, 5,000 points was already an astounding reward for a single test. So, for a candidate to receive 12,700 points at once. Honestly, He really could not bring himself to believe such a thing to be possible. Elder Liu pondered for a moment before issuing his instructions. For the time being, let's announce the results. Afterward, conduct a challenge of the defeated to check if Zhongxian really has the ability to earn so many points at once. Very well. Elder Han Zhu nodded. After 3 days of examinations, the candidates were all bound to be exhausted. Thus, the Sanctum of Sages would usually announce the results quickly so that they could rest as soon as possible. However, there were also exceptions to the convention. For instance, there were times when the scores of several candidates appeared to be abnormal. In such situations, the Sanctum of Sages would organize a challenge of the defeated to allow those who did not clear the examination to challenge those who did and those in the ordinary division to challenge those in the elite division. Firstly, this served to showcase the strength of the students so that teachers could tailor their guidance to their needs in the future. Secondly, it was to reassure the candidates that the examination was fair and impartial. There was no cheating, nepotism, or anything of the sort involved. If the candidates learned that Zhongxian had gotten into the top 50 in the last 2 minutes, there were bound to be many who would question the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination. In such a case, the challenge of the defeated served to show that he had obtained his position through his true strength. Let's go. After saying those words, Elder Liu beckoned for the others to follow him before taking the lead. The others quickly followed him, and before long, they arrived in the square. At this moment, all the candidates were already out of the mountain gate, and they were staring in the sky with expectant and tense looks on their faces. Congratulations on completing the 3-day examination. You have all worked hard. Now, I shall announce the results of the examination. First and foremost, I shall announce the names of the candidates who have been selected to join the elite division. As Elder Liu's resounding voice echoed through the square, he grabbed the space ahead of him, and the sky suddenly seemed to have turned into glistening jadeite. With a brilliant radiance, names began appearing one after another. Feng Zi, Zhong Yu, Yuan Haiqing, Bai Qingxian. With the appearance of each name, there would be resounding cheers from the crowd. I have heard of Feng Zi. He's the direct disciple of one of the grand elders of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. He's the direct disciple of a 9-star Master Teacher. No wonder he's so formidable. Having received the most accurate guidance from a young age, he's bound to be impeccable in all fields, be it in terms of his strength or his zhenqi. It's a given that he would take first place. I thought that Zhong Yu would have a chance to take first place in this entrance examination. The Zhong clan is too big, and they have too many geniuses in their ranks. While Zhong Yu might possess exceptional talent, he's still far from being ranked at the top. Naturally, the resources he can tap into are limited as well. Most of the names that appeared were familiar to the crowd here, and to them, they were existences reminiscent of the untouchable stars in the sky. Chen Liao. She got into the elite division, too? Zhongxian noted. Considering how Chen Liao had been able to get into the top 50 despite being only at leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle, it seemed like she did possess some exceptional means. As more and more names were revealed, Zhongxian could not help but wonder, there are so many candidates with the surname Zhong. Are they all from the Zhong clan? So far, 40 names had already appeared, but 10 of them went by the surname Zhong. Were they all from the Zhong clan? For the Zhong clan to take up 10 out of the 50 slots of the elite division, were they not a little too powerful? Who? Just as Zhongxian was about to turn to Zhong Zhouxiao to ask him about the matter, the light in the sky flickered for the last time, and a certain name appeared at the very end of the list. Zhongxian? Is he from the Zhong clan, too? I don't think so. I saw the list of candidates dispatched by the Zhong clan this year, and there wasn't such a name on it. He seems to be some master teacher from the Qingyuan Empire. As soon as he arrived in the square, he offended Chen Liao from the Glacier Plain Court and pummeled Zhong Qian from the Zhong clan. He actually dared pummel Zhong Qian? He sure is brave. Well, how could one who possesses the strength to get into the elite division possibly lack self-confidence? When Zhong Qian's name appeared, a huge commotion immediately broke out among the crowd. Everyone present knew of the first 49 names. They were all from distinguished clans or were famed geniuses whose names had spread far and wide. Only the name in 50th place, Zhongxian, was completely unfamiliar to all of them. In such a bizarre manner, his name ended up standing out in the list. Primordial Spirit Realm Pinnacle, not to mention that he was just an insignificant figure from the remote Qingyuan Empire, and yet, he still managed to get into the top 50. Truly inconceivable. Chapter 1301 Being able to sleep is an important skill, damn it. Damn it. With a trembling body, Zhong Qian cursed furiously beneath his breath. He had performed beyond his usual limits in the examination, and he thought that it would allow him to soar through the ranks. Yet, contrary to all of his expectations, he still failed to get into the top 50. Not only that, as if adding insult to his injury, it was that Zhongshen bastard who took the final position, squeezing him out of the elite division. He had been thinking that with the authority he would gain from getting into the elite division, he would be able to teach that fellow a lesson. But as if the heavens were playing tricks on him, the situation somehow evolved to this point. Brother Yunfeng, it's that Zhongshen fellow who made a move against me. He was also the one who squeezed me out of the top 50 as well. With clenched fists, Zhong Qian complained indignantly to a young man not too far away. Zhong Yunfeng was another candidate from the Zhong clan who managed to qualify for the elite division. He was ranked in the 46th place in the examination. I know, but you brought it upon yourself. Zhong Yunfeng glanced at Zhong Qian and harumphed indifferently. Even I would hesitate to approach those from the glacier plain caught carelessly, but you eagerly rushed up to them as soon as you arrived, wanting to fawn on them. You are really courting trouble. I admit that I was too arrogant and deserved to be humiliated, but that fellow showed blatant contempt for the Zhong clan in public, saying that those from the Zhong clan would put a leg into any affairs that concern a beautiful lady. And you really can't begin to imagine the haughty tone he took when he said those words too. We can't allow him to get away with defaming the Zhong clan so easily. Zhong Qian exclaimed indignantly. Don't even try using those little ploys of yours on me. Nevertheless, regardless of whether he has shown blatant contempt for the Zhong clan or not, he was indeed rather arrogant to make a move on you even after you have expressed your identity. Don't worry, I'll teach him a lesson later on and make him learn that just that bit of talent he has won't be enough for him to act so smugly in the sanctum of sages. Thank you, Brother Yunfeng. Hearing that the other party was willing to step up for him, Zhong Qian's eyes lit up in excitement. Zhong Yunfeng's bloodline was far purer than him, reaching the level of Tier 1. On top of that, the other party's cultivation was also significantly higher than his, reaching Grand Dominion Realm Primary Stage. If the other party was willing to make a move in his stead, that Zhongshen fellow would surely be thrashed. Yuan Zhong Yunfeng replied impassively. To him, a fellow who had originated from humble lands was just a short disturbance to his cultivation. It wasn't a problem worthy of his note. Moving on, these are the people who have qualified for the ordinary division. Ignoring the crowd's astonishment, Elder Liu waved his hand grandly once more. Silver lights gathered in the sky, and one by one, names flickered into existence. It didn't take too long for all 450 names of the candidates who had made it into the ordinary division to appear. After confirming that Zhong Zhouxiao's name was amidst them too, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Zhong Zhouxiao's ranking wasn't too high, ranging in the 460s, but nevertheless, what was important was that he had cleared the entrance examination and successfully became a student of the Sanctum of Sages too. As for the others who had journeyed here with them from Chenchong Empire, Ma Minghai and 6 others had managed to clear the examination too. Their rankings weren't too good, but on the overall, their group did fairly decent in terms of passing rate. After revealing the list of students who had made it into the ordinary division, Elder Liu continued, "Now, I'll be announcing those who are qualified as listening-in student." Then, with a wave of his hand, another list of 500 names appeared. All in all, the Sanctum of Sages accepted 500 normal students, inclusive of both the elite division and ordinary division, and 500 listening-in students each intake. Soon after the list of 500 listening-in students was revealed, excited and disappointed murmurings swiftly rippled across the crowd. Zhong Xian took a swift look at the list of listening-in students and noted that 4 of them were from their Chenchong Empire group too. All in all, 11 out of the 33 of them had got into the Sanctum of Sages, so it was a passing rate of 1/3. As compared to the results of the previous years, this could be said to be not too bad. Waving his hand casually, Elder Liu said with a firm voice, "Those whose names are in any of the lists, please remain in the area for a while longer. As for the rest, do head down to take a rest." Despite Elder Liu's polite choice of words, the authoritative undertone in his voice showed that it was a command instead of a request. No matter how indignant those disqualified candidates failed, they knew that it would be utter foolishness to question Elder Liu's judgment. Thus, they could only depart in dejection. In the end, the Sanctum of Sages wasn't a charity organization, and the true nature of the entrance examinations was to sieve out the proficient from the non-proficient. An inevitable result of that, there were bound to be those who would be left behind or eliminated. Unfortunately, their failure here would set them behind by a great deal. If they wanted to make a comeback, they would have to pay a far higher price than the others. In less than 10 minutes, only 1,000 people were left standing on the square. First and foremost, allow me to welcome all of you into the Sanctum of Sages. Elder Liu tapped his finger in the air, and identity tokens immediately appeared in the hands of each and every one of the qualified candidates. These are the Jade tokens representing your identity. They will be automatically updated to reflect your respective roles as a student in the Sanctum of Sages. Zhongxian glanced at his Jade token before glancing at the others around him. The Jade tokens for listening in students were light blue color, those in the ordinary divisions had light yellow tokens, and those in the elite division like him had black tokens. Taking a closer examination at his Jade token, he noted that there was a character, Sage, carved in seal script on it, and it emanated an air of ancient yet grand history. There were also some miscellaneous inscriptions by the side of the Jade token resembled the eyes of a human, as if signifying that the predecessors were looking over one. With a flick of his finger, Zhongxian dripped a droplet of blood onto the Jade token, and it immediately fused into it. Instinctively, he sensed that as long as he had the Jade token with him, he would be able to freely walk through the protective formations surrounding the Sanctum of Sages without triggering them. At the same time, Zhong Jiuxiao had also claimed ownership of the Jade token in his hand, and the elation on his face was impossible to miss. As an offspring from the Side family, he wasn't a highly regarded member of the Zhong clan. However, with his successful enrollment into the Sanctum of Sages, there would be a vast change in his standing. Perhaps, I might even be able to attend the annual assembly this year, Zhong Jiuxiao thought with his eyes glowing with excitement. The Zhong clan would organize an annual assembly each year, and only the inner clan members and accomplished members of the Side family would be invited to participate. Under normal circumstances, Zhong Jiuxiao wouldn't have been worthy of receiving an invitation, but now that he had become a student of the Sanctum of Sages, his standing within the Zhong clan would surely ascend to new heights. With his newfound status, he was already qualified to attend such high-tier clan assemblies. This is all thanks to Zhong Shi. Knowing that he would have never been able to achieve so much without Zhongxian's help, Zhong Jiuxiao instinctively shot a grateful glance toward the latter. While he was an offspring of the Zhong clan hadn't offered him much help in his cultivation and development as a master teacher at all. On the other hand, it was Zhongxian who tirelessly guided him along, not spurning him despite the hostility he had directed toward the other party previously. He had nothing but deep respect toward the young man's character and depth of knowledge. At this moment, Elder Liu's voice sounded once more. The entrance examination might have ended, but I can still see disappointment and regret in many of your eyes. So, the Sanctum of Sages will be conducting a challenge of the defeated so as to give you one last opportunity to rise through the ranks. That's wonderful. All I need is just an opportunity like that. Is this for real? The challenge of the defeated is rarely conducted, so who could have thought that we would actually encounter one here? This time, I shall become an official student of the Sanctum of Sages by hook or by crook. Upon hearing the announcement, the eyes of the candidates immediately lit up in excitement. While it wasn't common that for a challenge of the defeated to be conducted, it did occur a couple of times in history, so most candidates were still aware of its existence. The rules of the challenge of the defeated are simple. Listening in students will get an opportunity to challenge a student of the ordinary division, and if they were to emerge victorious, they will be able to claim that student's position. Similarly, students of the ordinary division will be able to challenge a student of the elite division, and they will be able to claim that student's position if they win. Everyone will only get one opportunity to choose and challenge an opponent, and those who fail the challenge will have to suffer a penalty. Elder Liu announced. I believe most of you should be familiar with these rules, so I shall not elaborate too much on it. For those who are still a little unsure, feel free to refer to the identity token you have just received. Refer to the identity token? Zhongxian extended his spiritual perception into the jade token in his hand, and the many rules of the Sanctum of Sages immediately appeared before him. There was indeed a portion regarding the challenge of the defeated. This challenge was established for the sake of equity. The strong would rise through the ranks, whereas the weak would be eliminated and cast away. In other words, survival of the fittest. However, the act of challenging someone who was more senior to one could be considered as a highly disrespectful act, so failure would mean incurring a penalty. There were various different types of penalties possible, ranging from paying compensation, physical punishment, to issuing a public apology. This was up to the winner to choose. In other words, while it was an opportunity for weaker candidates to rise through the ranks, they had to make sure to work within the limits of strength. Begin. With a resounding bellow, Elder Liu waved his hand, and a round dueling ring gradually emerged from the ground. On the other hand, the crowd swiftly went through the names they had seen on the name lists earlier in their minds so as to decide on whom they should challenge. I want to challenge the candidate who is ranked 500th in the entrance examination, Xuening. A voice suddenly sounded from the crowd. It was from one of the listening-in students. I recognize him. His Zhao Qi, the first place amongst the listening-in students, ranked 501th in the examination. I knew that he would want to challenge the candidate that is one rank above him. That's to be expected. Considering how there is only a rank difference between the two of them, the disparity in their capabilities shouldn't be too great. No matter what, he would have to give it a shot, or else he would regret it for life. Indeed. Anyone in his position would be reluctant to give up without a try, the crowd remarked as they saw someone amongst them standing out to issue a challenge. It was just a single rank of difference, but it made an entire world of difference of being a listening-in student and being an official student in the Sanctum of Sages. No matter who was in Zhao Qi's shoes, he would have to at least give it a shot. After all, how could one possibly be content to retire just like that when they were only a single step away from reaching the peak? Hula! After issuing the challenge, Zhao Qi leaped onto the ring. As you wish. A young man also walked out from the crowd and stepped onto the ring as well. Taking a closer look, Zhongxian realized that the young man was no other than the person who had fought with him over the Tianchen brew back at Qianchong Empire, only to lose 15 concentrated high-tier spirit stones to him in a bet, the third young master of the Xue clan, Xuenin. In that battle back then, the latter ended up vomiting for a long while due to moving too quickly, and he had been mocked by many due to that incident as well. But over the past few days, perhaps motivated by the experience with Zhongxian, he actually managed to take his cultivation a step further, reaching quasi-leaving aperture realm. While that kind of strength might not mean much against the ridiculously talented geniuses of the Sanctum of Sages, there was no denying that he was also amidst the cream of the crop of mankind. Xuening, what were the tests you have faced in the Mountain Gate examination? What kind of duel do you want to accept Zhao Qi's challenge with? Elder Han Zhu asked. The Sanctum of Sages didn't just select its students on the grounds of strength but an overall evaluation of capability. For this reason, the challenger would have to surpass the challenged in the latter's field of specialty in order to prove that he was worthy of taking the latter's place. The reason why I was able to clear the selection is due to my attacking speed and might. As long as he can defeat me while his cultivation is suppressed down to my level, I'll admit my loss. Xuening declared confidently with his head raised up high. Even though the Xue clan was only a Tier 3 sage clan, its ultimate technique, golden silk thread, was not to be underestimated. Had he not met with an anomaly like Zhongxian, the battle technique would have very well made him nigh invincible in his power class. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to clear the Mountain Gate examination to become a student of the Sanctum of Sages either. A fight. Very well. Zhao Qi nodded. With a ferocious howl, His cultivation realm swiftly plummeted down to quasi-leaving aperture realm as well. Hong long. A moment later, the duo was already clashing with one another. The both of them were indeed worthy of their titles as geniuses. Ingenious maneuvers were dashed out one after another, and powerful shockwaves rippled relentlessly into the surroundings. For the time being, the both of them seemed to be equally matched, making it difficult to discern who wielded the upper hand. Zhongshe, who do you think will win? Zhong Zhouxiao asked curiously. Xuening seems to be in an advantageous position in terms of his skills. Zhong Xian replied. My thoughts exactly, Zhong Zhouxiao remarked. Then, with a curious gaze, he turned to face Zhong Xian and asked, Right, Zhongshe. What kind of test did you encounter in the Mountain Gate examination? I'm curious to know how you were able to get into the elite division. The young man before him seemed to be a master in every art, be it in terms of cultivation, master teacher, appraising, painting. It was as if there was nothing he didn't know, nothing he didn't specialize in. As such, Zhong Zhouxiao simply couldn't help but wonder what capability did Zhong Xian rely on to get into the elite division. How I got into the elite division? A look of rumination appeared on Zhong Xian's face before he replied, Well, I guess I slept my way through. For those who have forgotten, the bloodlines of sage clans can be categorized into below Tier 2, Tier 1, Earth Tier, and Sky Tier. Chapter 1302 Challenging Zhong Xian. You slept your way through? Zhong Zhouxiao widened his eyes, flabbergasted, unable to comprehend what was going on. He asked how Zhong Xian became a student of the elite division, hoping to learn from his experiences, but the latter told him that he slept the way through. Indeed. Not everyone will be able to handle 3 whole days of it straight. Zhong Xian continued with a tone reminiscent of a forlorn expert who was unable to find a single person who could rival him. To be honest, he never thought that he would actually be able to sleep for 3 days in a single go, and he was truly shocked when he woke up. But thinking back, it was really well worth it. Even if he were to remain awake, there was also nothing much he could do. There were too many flaws in the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld, so it was impossible for him to continue cultivating it. On the other hand, Sage Kuei, for some inexplicable reason to him, seemed to be overly traumatized by what he had said as well. Rather than being placed in an awkward position for 3 whole days, it was really a much wiser decision to use this time to refresh himself for his future journey in the Sanctum of Sages. After all, having the time to sleep his fill was a luxury that he might not be able to afford anymore later on. 3 whole days straight. Zhong Zhouxiao had an expression that looked as if he had seen a ghost. Zhongshe, you mean to say that while we were busy clearing tests in the Mountain Gate, not daring to rest for an instant for fear of being overtaken, you were actually sleeping for 3 days straight? Indeed. I didn't think that I would be able to sleep for so long either. Zhong Xian replied with a bitter smile. Despite sleeping for 3 days, you were still able to qualify as a student of the elite division. Gulping down a mouthful of saliva, Zhong Zhouxiao felt that he was going mad. From the moment he entered the Mountain Gate, he had been doing everything he could to showcase his talents, fearing that a second of rest would mean the difference between success and failure. Yet, the young man before him actually slept the 3 days through, and even so, he was still able to make it into the elite division. Could the world be any more unfair than this? Wonderful. Splendid. Third young master Shui, beautifully done. While Zhong Zhouxiao was about to explode from shock, a wave of cheerings suddenly broke out in the surroundings. Raising his gaze, he saw that the duel on the stage had already concluded. The challenger, Zhao Qi, had been tightly bound by the golden silk thread like a cocoon. No matter how hard he struggled, he found himself unable to move at all. Xuening's golden silk thread might have been ineffective against Zhong Xian, but it was still a formidable weapon against most other cultivators. Zhao Qi wasn't weak either, but he was still eventually cornered by it. I admit defeat. With dejection glooming between his brows, Zhao Qi sighed deeply and conceded defeat. He thought that since the difference in score between the both of them wasn't too big, with a little bit of luck, he should be able to emerge victorious. However, from the looks of it now, it seemed like the Mountain Gate examination was indeed fair and impartial. Its ability to accurately gauge the capability of each candidate was unquestionable. I'm willing to accept the punishment. After being freed, Zhao Qi left behind these words before walking down the ring quietly. Seeing that the first duel had concluded, Elder Liu asked once more with a smile, "Is there anyone else who wishes to issue a challenge?" "I wish to issue a challenge. The person I want to challenge is the person in the 50th rank, Zhong Xian." A loud bellow boomed across the square, and a figure leaped onto the stage. It's the 52nd rank Meng Fanxing. He's the offspring of the Sage clan, Meng clan. Even though his bloodline is only at Tier 2, his cultivation has reached half-grand Dominion realm. How could someone like him possibly tolerate having the primordial spirit realm pinnacle Zhong Xian getting into the elite division when he couldn't qualify for it? Indeed. As soon as the challenge of the defeated was announced, I knew that there would surely be plenty of people who would want to challenge Zhong Xian. Not only is his cultivation realm low, more importantly, he's taking up the very last seat to the elite division. There's bound to be many people eyeing his position. That reminds me, I just heard news from a friend of mine in the Sanctum of Sages. I can't verify whether it's true or not, but it said that Zhong Xian had never gotten into the top 500 throughout the course of the examination. It was only when the Jade Tablet of Trials refreshed for the final time that his name suddenly appeared in the 50th place, taking up the very last slot for the elite division. In other words, his score just increased by more than 10,000 points all of a sudden. His score increased by more than 10,000 points all of a sudden? Isn't that obviously cheating? Well, we can't really say for sure at this point yet. If he has really cheated, the Sanctum of Sages would have dealt with him. Hearing that someone had challenged Zhong Xian, a huge commotion immediately broke out in the surroundings. Amidst the crowd, Zhong Qian's eyes also reddened in excitement. The happenings in the Hall of Result had begun spreading amidst the crowd, and quite a few people were already aware of the peculiarity in Zhong Xian's results. Every single one of them was interested to see just what kind of unique ability did that master teacher named Zhong Xian possess to be able to qualify as a student of the elite division. Elder Liu and Elder Han Zhu also turned their gazes over. They wanted to see the young man's performance so as to have the doubts they had been harboring answered. "You want to challenge me?" "Sure." On the other hand, Zhong Xian didn't think that someone would challenge him, and he shook his head helplessly. With a leap, he headed up the dueling ring as well. As much as he wanted to keep a low profile and stay out of trouble, he wasn't someone who was afraid to stir the pot. If someone wanted to take his place, the other party would do well to show strength worthy of doing so. "May I know what kind of test did Zhong Shi undergo in the Mountain Gate examination?" "I'll just compete with you on whatever you faced in there," Meng Fanxing harumphed with a slight hint of disdain in his voice. "What kind of a test I just underwent? But I just woke up and I don't feel like sleeping anymore." "Forget it, let's not waste our time then. Why don't we just settle it with a normal duel?" Zhong Xian thought about the previous examination he had and shook his head. He had just slept for 3 days straight, and it hadn't been even an hour since he had woken up. If he were to compete with the other party right now in who could sleep for a longer period of time, he would definitely be in a disadvantageous position. Besides, the crowd wouldn't be interested in watching such a duel either. All in all, it would be much more convenient to settle it with a fight, just like what Xuening did earlier. It would be swift, trouble-free, and more importantly, effective. "You want to have a duel with me? Are you serious?" Meng Fanxing stared at Zhong Xian as if he was looking right at a fool. "I am a half-grand Dominion realm expert, whereas you are just at primordial spirit realm pinnacle. Are you certain that you want to have a match with me? You aren't daydreaming at the moment, are you?" Zhong Xian nodded affirmatively. "Very well. I'll suppress my cultivation to the same level as you then." Meng Fanxing nodded before swiftly suppressing his cultivation down to primordial spirit realm pinnacle. After which, he got into an offensive stance and said, "Let's begin then." "Very well," Zhong Xian replied. In truth, it didn't matter much to him whether Meng Fanxing suppressed his cultivation or not. However, since the other party had already done so, he couldn't be bothered to waste his breath either. It was not like there would have been a difference in the outcome anyway. With a swift dash, Zhongxian's figure suddenly appeared right before Meng Fanqing, and his hand darted forward to strike the latter. You! In the face of the palm strike, Meng Fanqing felt as if the world was crushing down on him. He found that the space around him had been completely sealed, be it his front, back, left, or right, rendering it completely impossible for him to flee. In an instant, Meng Fanqing's breathing rapidly hastened to the point where he was wheezing for air, and his face turned completely red. But before the palm strike could land, Zhongxian abruptly withdrew his hand. Due to the strike and the withdrawal of the palm happening in quick succession, to the eyes of most spectators, it would appear that he was only carrying out a particularly crude feint. But it was such a move that caused Meng Fanqing's head to turn completely blank in an instant, almost as if someone had used a sword to sever his flow of thoughts. His body staggered in a manner reminiscent of a drunk man for a moment before collapsing to the ground with a resounding pardon. Meng Fanqing had fainted. What happened? I didn't even sense the slightest disturbance in the spiritual energy in the air, so why would Meng Fanqing faint all of a sudden? I'm not too sure either. All I saw was Zhongxian's faint. The crowd stared at one another in bewilderment, unable to make sense of the situation before them. The movements of Zhongxian's previous palm strike was extremely simple, consisting of just a forward thrust and a withdrawal. There didn't seem to be anything particularly ingenious about it, and there wasn't even any zhenqi infused into the strike. Yet, such an attack actually left Meng Fanqing fixated on the spot, not attempting to dodge it at all, and even though the attack didn't land, he still fainted on the spot. What was going on? Even though the square was filled with 7-star master teachers, each and every single one of them were confounded by what they were seeing. What a formidable palm strike! In contrast to the looks of incomprehension from the crowd, Elder Liu remarked with narrowed eyes. As a Saint 8 Dan expert, he was able to notice what was wrong with the palm strike in an instant. The imposing momentum behind the palm makes one believe that it's a physical attack, but the truth is that it's an attack directed right at the soul instead. It aims to wedge in overwhelming pressure and helplessness into its target's mind, forcing it into a state of extreme tension. Then, when the pressure abruptly vanishes, the instinctive relaxation of the mind results in a massive amount of blood leaving the brain, thus bringing about a faint spell. Elder Han Zhu also nodded in agreement to Elder Liu's analysis. Indeed, while the mind and body may seem separate, huge fluctuations in emotions can affect a person's physical state tremendously. What this palm utilizes is fear tactic. But still, to be able to make his opponent faint with just a casual strike devoid of any surge of zhenqi or powerful emanation of aura. Just how precise is his control over his soul energy? As simple as it may seem in theory, carrying it out in practice was fraught with difficulties. Putting all aside, even he would find it difficult to achieve such a feat if he were to suppress his cultivation down to primordial spirit realm pinnacle. It seems like there's indeed something extraordinary about Zhongxian after all. Looks like there's nothing wrong with the results in the Mountain Gate examination. Elder Liu nodded. While it was unlikely for there to be any problems with the point allocation system of the Jade Tablet of Trials, he had wondered if the young man had received his results through sheer luck. However, from the looks of it now, it was apparent that there was no such thing as luck in the outcome of the Mountain Gate examination. It was either one had the capability or one didn't. When Meng Fanqing finally roused to once more, his dazed look swiftly turned into a face reddened in embarrassment as it dawned upon him what had just happened, and he muttered in disbelief, "I've lost." He had no idea how it happened, but he actually fainted from a single blow. How embarrassing. "It's fine," Zhongxian replied. "I'm willing to accept my punishment." Knowing that he had failed the challenge, Meng Fanqing gritted his teeth tightly. "There's no need for that. We are all students from the Sanctum of Sages, so it's nothing much for us to have a casual duel with one another." Zhongxian replied with a smile. To be honest, he only received this placing due to Sage Kuei tampering with the score, so it was normal that the other party would harbor some doubts toward his strength. Zhongshe is really a magnanimous person. It's no wonder why you were able to become a student of the elite division. I'm impressed. Meng Fanqing clasped his fist and bowed respectfully. To be able to keep an open heart before the skepticism and doubts of others, He was really still lacking in his cultivation of the mind as compared to the young man before him. "You're too polite," Zhong Xian replied with a nod as he began making his way down the stage. However, a voice suddenly sounded at this moment. "Hold it for a moment. I also wish to try out Zhong Shi's hand too." Turning his head over, Zhong Xian saw a familiar face walking up. It was the man whom he had smacked to the ground with a single palm prior to the start of the Mountain Gate examination. "Zhong Qian, did that fellow fail to see through my strength?" Seeing that the other party was still intent on challenging him despite all that had happened, Zhong Xian's eyebrows shot up. It was one thing if Zhong Qian had never challenged him before, but the fact that the other party couldn't even withstand a simple palm strike from him should be sufficient to highlight the vast disparity in strength between the both of them. Yet, to challenge him at this moment. Did he think that he hadn't been humiliated enough yet? It's Zhong Qian. Wasn't he defeated already? I don't get it either. Why would he challenge Zhong Xian again at this point? Could he have some kind of trump card which he hasn't used yet? Well, he's placed in the 51st place after all. How could he give up without a fight? Most of those in the crowd were also aware that the both of them had traded blows in the past, and looks of bewilderment surfaced on their faces. It was just 3 days ago that Zhong Qian was utterly defeated by Zhong Xian, so wasn't it just pure foolishness to challenge him once more at this point? "You want to have a duel with me?" Zhong Xian shot a glance toward Zhong Qian and asked. "That's right. However, since you are from the elite division, surely you wouldn't make me fight you with my cultivation suppressed, would you?" Zhong Qian harumphed. Zhong Xian shrugged. "You can choose not to suppress your cultivation if you want to." "Very well, let's begin then." Zhong Qian's smile curled up triumphantly as a powerful aura burst forth from him. Half-grand Dominion Realm? No wonder. Feeling the strength emanated by the other party, Zhong Xian nodded in realization. That would explain why Zhong Qian still dared to challenge him despite the humiliating defeat he had suffered the previous time around. It seemed like he had managed to achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation over the past 3 days. Chapter 1303 The Strength of the Zhong clan's bloodline. Hong Long. While Zhong Xian was still in deep thoughts, Zhong Qian was already dashing toward him while gathering might in his palm. He had chosen to drive his half-grand Dominion realm cultivation to its very limits from the very start, and the overwhelming energy that was emanating from him caused the surrounding air to turn viscous. It felt as if the entire dueling ring had turned into his dominion, and anyone who stepped into the area would be completely under his control. "Not bad," Zhong Xian remarked leisurely, as expected of one of the geniuses of the Zhong clan. Even though it was just an advancement by a cultivation stage, Zhong Qian's strength had grown significantly as compared to 3 days ago. If he were to continue taking the other party lightly, he might really lose the duel. With a slight tap of his finger, Zhong Xian shot a brilliant burst of sword chi straight toward to the other party's palm strike. He was only at primordial spirit realm at the moment, and due to his lacking cultivation, he could only rely on his comprehension of swordsmanship to rival the other party. Sila. The surge of sword chi emanated a chill which seemed to pierce right into one's bones, and it felt as if it would be able to slice through anything that stood in its path. What? Zhong Qian didn't expect Zhong Xian to have such a deep comprehension of swordsmanship. He realized that if he were to clash with the sword chi directly with his palm, he could very well be sliced into 2. Thus, he quickly clenched his remaining free hand into a fist and threw it forward. Hong Long. Even though this punch was hurled forward all of a sudden, that didn't hinder the fluidity and agility of his movements. At its current speed, it would be able to strike Zhong Xian and severely wound him before the sword chi could reach him. He's indeed much more powerful than Zhong Zhouxiao, Zhong Xian noted. 3 days ago, he was able to subdue Zhong Qian with just a single palm strike, so he thought that it should be a walk in the park for him to defeat the latter once more. However, considering the current circumstances, he would really be underestimating his opponent if he were to continue fighting with such a mindset. Just the speed of the transformation in Zhong Qian's maneuver meant that his comprehension of combat had already achieved an extremely high level, considerably higher than an average combat master. Nevertheless, despite Zhong Qian's immense growth, he would still require a lot more work before he would be a match for him. Lines of insight rippled in Zhongxian's eyes as he gazed at Zhongqian's movements once more. This time around, it seemed like the latter's movements had slowed down, slowly displaying before his eyes. Zhenqi telepathy? Through his eye of insight, Zhongxian also swiftly noticed that something was amiss. There was a thin thread extending from afar, connected right to Zhongqian's ear. Clearly, someone was offering pointers to Zhongqian for this duel. It seemed like this line of communication was established using a sort of unique secret art, making it far more difficult to notice than ordinary Zhenqi telepathy. Had it not been for Zhongxian's eye of insight, it would be doubtful whether he would have been able to notice it or not. Most likely, this was a mean to hide the matter from the eyes of Elder Liu and the others. But still, to possess means capable of deceiving even a Saint 8 Dan expert. It seemed like the Zhong clan was really not to be underestimated. Fortunately, the Eye of Insight had the ability to track down even the faintest of traces. As discreet as the matter was carried out, it was still incapable of fooling his eyes. Tracing the line, Zhongxian's gaze was soon led to a young man beneath the stage. That's the candidate in the 46th rank, Zhong Yunfeng. Zhongxian recognized the young man as the person who had been sitting with Zhongqian all this while. It's no wonder why this fellow dares to challenge me, and his grasp over combat also seemed to have abruptly improved by leaps and bounds. No doubt about it, Zhong Yunfeng must be offering him pointers from the back. Processing all of these in an instant, a smile crept onto Zhongxian's lips as he stood calmly before Zhongqian's punch. Instead of dodging, he raised his other hand and tapped forward. Who? The space ahead of him suddenly began twisting together, causing Zhongqian to feel as if he had been plunged into a bog. No matter how he pushed his fist forward, he found that he was unable to advance his punch any further. Dominion. Ever since leaving Chenchong Empire, other than guiding Zhong Zhouxiao along with his cultivation and swordsmanship, he hadn't been idling on his personal growth either. At this point, he had already fully assimilated the use of his 1-meter dominion into his fighting style. In the past, his dominion took a form reminiscent of a light barrier, surrounding his entire body. However, with his enhanced grasp over the technique, he was able to cast a miniaturized dominion around him at will. This way, not only would he be able to alleviate the frightening consumption of zhenqi, the presence of his dominion would also be almost indiscernible as well, making it more difficult to guard against it. With his fist locked in place, Zhongqian's punch fell flat, and Zhongxian's sword qi continued flying for his other palm. Sila. A spray of blood splattered into the sky as the zhenqi gathered in Zhongqian's palm dissipated under the severance of the sword qi. Arth. There was a scream of agony as Zhongqian's palm was pierced through by the sword qi, and a walnut-sized hole appeared on his hand. You have lost. Having subdued the other party with a single strike, Zhongxian took a step back and halted his offense. This single strike should be more than enough to show the disparity in the strength between the both of them. Besides, considering that Zhongqian wasn't a match for him while he was still at full strength, he would stand even less of a chance now that there was a hole in his palm. I have lost. No way. There's no way I would lose. Zhongqian quickly took out several medicinal herbs to halt the bleeding of his palm before glaring at Zhongxian with eyes reddened in frenzy. Hong Long. A rampaging aura burst forth from Zhongqian, and astonishingly, it felt like he was growing stronger at a rapid pace. In the sky, Elder Hanju was overlooking the duel when he saw this sight, and his face turned livid with graveness. Zhongqian is tapping into the power of his bloodline. Should we intervene in the battle? It was only a friendly duel, but Zhongqian actually went to the extent of tapping into the power of his bloodline. This could potentially be dangerous for both Zhongxian and Zhongqian. Take a look at Zhongxian. Instead of responding to Elder Hanju's question straight, Elder Liu pointed at the area ahead of him. Perplexed, Elder Hanju turned his gaze over, and what he saw left his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. On the stage, there was not the slightest hint of nervousness or anxiety to be seen on Zhongxian's face. It was almost as if he knew that Zhongqian would make such a move. A primordial spirit realm pinnacle defeating a half-grand dominion realm. I'm really interested to see what other miracles can Zhongxian bring us. Elder Liu chuckled softly. It was simply too astounding for a single candidate to earn 12,700 points within 2 minutes that Elder Liu thought that there might have been an error in the Mountain Gate examination. However, the sight before him had proved his initial assumptions to be completely wrong. The young man before him was really just that fearsome. I understand. Elder Han Zhu nodded. I'll make a move only when he's really in danger. Considering the composed attitude Zhong Xian held toward Zhong Qian's outburst, it was likely that he was confident of neutralizing the latter's offense. Since that was the case, it might be worth waiting a little to see what would happen. Boom. While the two elders of the Sanctum of Sages were chatting with one another, on the stage, Zhong Qian had finally fully activated his bloodline. Even though his cultivation was still capped at half-grand Dominion realm, his aura had turned far more violent than before, a little reminiscent of a ravenous ancient beast awakening from its long sleep. Who? With a swift charge, Zhong Qian threw his fist toward Zhong Xian once more. Chem. Zhong Xian frowned. He thought that Zhong Qian's moves would change after his bloodline had been activated, perhaps utilizing a more powerful battle technique or that sort. He didn't think that the latter would attack him with just a straightforward jab. Surely such a move would be beneath even the most basic of battle techniques. Could it be that the activation of his bloodline had enhanced his strength but limited the flexibility in the type of attacks he could utilize? If that was the case, was there any point to activating his bloodline? Forget it, I should be able to know the answer soon enough. This will be a good opportunity for me to find out just what is so special about the Zhong clan's bloodline. Knowing that it was pointless to think about such matters at this point, Zhong Xian raised his palm to meet Zhong Qian's punch. This time, he didn't use any battle technique either. He was intending to clash straight on with Zhong Qian. Hoo-la! The palm and the punch swiftly closed in on one another, but just as when they were about to meet, Zhong Xian suddenly saw something blur across his field of vision, and cold sweat immediately broke out all over this body. Eye of Insight. Sensing that something was wrong, he swiftly activated his Eye of Insight, and only then did he realize that the other party's punch had, at some point, arrived right before his chest, just a split instant away from striking him. How can this be? Can a fist even be teleported? Zhong Xian's eyes widened in horror. There was no way he would have made such a fatal calculation error in battle. Given the trajectory of Zhong Qian's punch, it would have to collide with his palm first before getting to him. Yet, to actually bypass his defense and arrive before his chest in an instant. Could it really be teleportation? But as one who had practiced the heavenly art of dimension unravel, even if Zhong Xian couldn't bend space according to his will yet, he would still have noticed the warping in space if Zhong Qian had really teleported. It was apparent that Zhong Qian's punch hadn't resulted in any disturbance in the surrounding space, so it would be safe to assume that it was a perfectly ordinary attack. The situation was truly inconceivable. However, at this current moment, Zhong Xian didn't have the luxury to think any deeper into the matter either. Dominion. With a deep exhalation, Zhong Xian immediately pressed his chest backward as he swiftly retreated back with a powerful leap as well. At the same time, a meter of Dominion appeared around him. Wang. But before Zhong Xian's Dominion could be formed, a sharp ache struck his chest. Peng. His body was sent flying backward, but fortunately, he managed to ward off the momentum of the strike and regain his balance in midair. Nevertheless, the strike had still dealt considerable damage to him, and his face turned pale. How swift! Zhong Xian clenched his fists in disbelief. This was the first time he had suffered such a huge setback fighting against others. His Dominion could be activated at will, which meant that he was able to trigger it in an instant. Logically speaking, the other party's fist should still have been a distance away from him, so why would it strike him all of a sudden? Fortunately, his Dominion still managed to impede Zhong Qian's fist significantly at the crucial juncture, or else if that punch were to land squarely on him, even if he didn't sustain grievous injuries, his fighting ability would have been severely compromised too. Who? Zhong Xian swiftly drove his Heaven's Path Zhenqi to recover his energy while he assessed Zhong Qian with narrowed eyes. All along, he didn't think that Zhong Qian was a formidable adversary, so he didn't think much of the latter either. However, this setback had taught him that those who had the bloodline of the sage clans running through their veins were more frightening than he had imagined them to be. With Zhong Qian's current strength, even ordinary Grand Dominion Realm primary stage cultivators wouldn't be a match for him. Where do you think you are running off to? With his first strike landing effectively on his foe, a hint of cruel glee surfaced in Zhong Qian's eyes. With a swift leap, he dashed forward once more. He had only taken a single step, but for some reason, he appeared before Zhong Qian in the next instant with a fist charged with power. Voila! A deafening sonic boom exploded in the air, and it felt as if even space would be torn down by the sheer might of the fist. Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow Palm. Knowing that he would stand no chance against Zhong Qian through ordinary means, especially given the bizarre sight that had happened earlier, Zhong Qian raised his palm and executed ancient sage Qiu Wu's battle technique. Hong Long. Using the might of his palm, Zhong Qian sealed the space around Zhong Qian, intending TP prevent the latter from making any abrupt actions. But once again before his palm could land, Zhong Qian's fist had already bypassed his attack once more, appearing right before his chest. Just what's going on? Zhong Qian's face turned awfully ugly. Under normal circumstances, his heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm should have been able to overcome the other party's attack with ease. It was as if the other party had known that he would make that move and launched a series of countermeasures before he could even react, bringing the punch to somewhere his palm couldn't affect. Just what in the world was going on? Sword Quintessence, Sea of Blades. With a furious roar, Zhong Qian opened up all of his acupoints and ejected sword qi into his surroundings. Ding 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 ding. Under the furious onslaught of the sword qi, Zhong Qian had no choice but to withdraw his attack. At this moment, Zhong Qian's face had also turned slightly pale, and he was panting heavily. It seemed like the two punches earlier had drained him greatly as well. That was a close one. With a livid face, Zhong Qian swiftly retreated several steps back to create some distance between him and Zhong Qian. At this moment, an anxious voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Zhongshe, that's the ability of the Zhong clan's bloodlined time compression. It was Chen Liao's face. Time compression? A deep frown emerged on Zhong Qian's face. Chapter 1304 Make a Breakthrough While I'm at I. He knew that the ability of the Luo clan's bloodline had something to do with space. As the little princess of the Luo clan, Ruo Xin wielded the Dimension Silencer in her hand as well, which granted her fearsome might. As for the Zhong clan, thinking back, he had never asked Zhong Zhouxiao about their bloodline ability either, so he didn't know what it was. But never in his dreams could he have imagined that it would be related to the secrets of time. Time and space, these were the two fundamental building blocks of the world. Without a doubt, a person who could grasp time would have the world in his grasp too. This would explain why, despite his timely reflexes, the enemy still managed to bypass his defenses to land his attacks. Most likely, through burning his bloodline, Zhong Qian's fist had affected his perception of time, thus resulting in his attacks appearing to be teleporting to him. In a clash between experts, the difference between life and death banked on a fraction of an instant. If one could compress time, even if it was just 1/100th of a breath, it could play a crucial role in the midst of a tight battle. With such a powerful bloodline ability, it was no wonder why the Zhong clan was able to remain as the #1 sage clan on the Master-Teacher continent over the years. However, it appears that burning his bloodline to tap into the power of time drains him swiftly as well. It doesn't seem like he will be able to maintain that state for too long. Zhong Qian analyzed. As one who had cultivated the heavenly art of dimension unravel, he knew very well that tapping into abilities that exceeded one's cultivation would drain one's life force or even potential. It's fortunate that I have the Eye of Insight, or else those two punches would have surely left me severely wounded at the very least. Zhong Qian thought as a terrified shudder ran through his body. It was due to the Eye of Insight that he was able to clearly perceive the other party's punch trajectory in the nick of the moment and react accordingly. Otherwise, he would have surely suffered severe injuries. I'll defeat you. While Zhong Qian was still immersed in his thoughts, Zhong Qian had already managed to catch his breath, and with a furious roar, he charged forward once more. He won't be able to sustain that ability for too long. As long as I were to avoid his attacks and put some distance between the both of us, it shouldn't be too difficult for me to defeat him. Zhong Qian swiftly came up with a countermeasure. So far, It appeared that there was a limit to the range of Zhong Qian's time compression. So, if Zhong Qian were to resort to long-range attacks instead, he should be able to overcome the other party's attacks easily. And everything else would be easy. With a step, Zhong Qian executed the unbounded Voyager, and reminiscent to teleportation, he abruptly appeared at the other end of the dueling ring. Pada. Barely an instant after Zhong Qian left, Zhong Qian's punch fell heavily on the area where he was standing previously. Had he been a split second slower, that punch could have very well landed on him. Now, knowing that this was the ideal opportunity to launch an attack, Zhong Qian tapped his finger in Zhong Qian's direction. Woo 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 woo. 4 surges of sword chi burst forth, and they whizzed across the dueling ring to arrive before Zhong Qian in less than a fraction of a second. Puha! 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 Those 4 sword chi stabbed right into Zhong Qian's feet and palms, pinning him firmly onto the dueling stage with their momentum. After doing all of that, Zhong Qian heaved a sigh of relief. It was fortunate that Chen Liao had given him a timely reminder of the matter, or else it would have been difficult for him to turn the tables around on Zhong Qian without using his library of Heaven's Path. You have lost. Placing his hands behind his back, Zhong Qian gazed down on Zhong Qian coldly. Zhong Qian's eyes were filled with craze, but just as he wanted to speak, the complete exhaustion of his strength and the severe injuries he had sustained finally took a toll on him, and he caved in and fainted. He had exerted himself too much by burning his bloodline. He had gone all out in hopes of exacting vengeance and acquiring the final slot into the elite division, but his efforts ended up in futility. While the cultivation of the young man before him wasn't too high, his fighting prowess was nothing short of terrifying. A light breeze swept across the square, and a figure suddenly appeared on top of the stage, Zhong Yunfeng. He took a glance at Zhong Qian on the ground, and after confirming that the sword chi hadn't struck any of the vitals, he heaved an inconspicuous sigh of relief. Following which, he waved his hand toward the bottom of the dueling ring. Noting the gesture, Zhong Yu hurriedly rushed onto the dueling ring and fed Zhong Qian several recovery pills before carrying him down. Zhong Yunfeng finally turned his attention to Zhong Qian, and with a face devoid of expression, he remarked, "It seems like you are quite powerful after all." To offer pointers to Zhong Qian remotely such that he could at least take a blow or two from me. You aren't too weak yourself either. Zhong Qian replied composedly. Offer pointers to Zhong Qian remotely? Isn't that flouting the rules? The Zhong clan is really getting arrogant. This is too much. Just because they wield great influence in the sanctum of sages doesn't mean they can blatantly disregard the rules like that. A huge commotion broke out amidst the crowd. The challenge of the defeated was a fight to vie for the precious and limited slots in the sanctum of sages, so fairness was extremely important. It was one thing for Zhong Qian to burn his bloodline, but to think that he would have another person guiding him from behind. This was a clear infringement of the rules. Not expecting the other party to be able to see through his little moves and even expose them publicly, Zhong Yunfeng's impassive expression immediately darkened a little. Do you dare to face me in a duel? Sure, it'll be my pleasure. Zhong Qian replied calmly. He had been rather pissed off at how the other party had been playing little tricks behind his back. Since the other party had come knocking on his door, he didn't mind teaching him a lesson. Good. Seeing that Zhong Qian had agreed to it, Zhong Yunfeng smirked. He stood unmovingly on the spot, but for some reason, his figure suddenly seemed to tower. His aura swiftly intensified, to the point that it seemed as though he would tear apart the seals around the dueling ring. Wang. In the next moment, a faint light barrier of roughly 5 meters in radius materialized around Zhong Yunfeng. And standing in the middle of the light, Zhong Yunfeng felt like an indomitable existence. This is a true dominion. Zhong Qian's face turned grim. This was the first time he was seeing a Grand Dominion realm expert casting a dominion. Not only did it cover an area greater than his, the power pulsating within it was also even purer and more profound. The difference in the fighting prowess between each realm grows progressively larger as one advances further up the Saint realm. Zhong Qian might be powerful, but against a Grand Dominion realm cultivator of Zhong Yunfeng's caliber, it's unlikely that he would stand much of a chance. Elder Han Zhu frowned. From leaving Aperture Realm onward, The gap of a single realm could possibly mean a difference in fighting prowess by several-fold. It was for this reason that while Zhongxian could easily defeat opponent 8 to 9 cultivation stages stronger than him at Transcendent Mortal, but beyond Saint Realm, most of the time, challenging an opponent that was even 6 to 7 cultivation stages higher than him was already difficult for him. It was not that Zhongxian was getting weaker, but the gap between each cultivation stage was simply increasing exponentially. This was similar to how even though the differences between 1 and 2 and 1 billion and 2 billion were both by a factor of 2, their differences in terms of absolute values were immense. Such was the case for Primordial Spirit Realm and Grand Dominion Realm too. The 4 lightning tribulations in between created a vast gap that was nearly unbridgeable between the two realms. In the first place, it was already a huge surprise to see Zhongxian defeating the half-Grand Dominion Realm Zhongqian. Now that he was faced against the Grand Dominion Realm primary stage Zhong Yunfeng. No matter how Elder Hanju looked at it, there was just no way Zhongxian could win. Based on the situation in the previous battle, he would indeed be no match for Zhong Yunfeng. Elder Liu nodded. As a Saint 8 Dan master teacher, he possessed a keen, discerning eye. From the earlier fight, he could roughly gauge Zhongxian's strength. Against normal Grand Dominion Realm experts, Zhongxian might still stand a chance. However, faced with a genius from the Zhong clan, the odds were that he would lose. Then, Elder Hanju was taken aback. Since the outcome of the battle is already clear, why are we still allowing them to fight? As geniuses, they have their own pride. Even if we manage to stop them here, Zhong Yunfeng will just find another way to challenge Zhongxian. Since that is the case, it would be much better to settle everything here. Elder Liu replied. More importantly, I'm interested to see just how much potential does Zhongxian harness within him. If they didn't settle the matter today, the Zhong clan would just continue to find other reasons to harass Zhongxian in the future. It was probably in view of this that Zhongxian accepted Zhong Yunfeng's duel without any hesitation too. All right then. Hearing those words, Elder Hanju nodded before falling silent. At the very least, if they were to settle their scores in the challenge of the defeated, should any life-threatening circumstances arise out of the duel, they would be able to intervene immediately, so Zhongxian's life wouldn't be in danger. You can go first. While the two elders were conversing with one another, Zhong Yunfeng was finally done with his preparation. He raised his hand and gestured for Zhongxian to make the first move. On the other hand, knowing that Zhong Yunfeng wouldn't be an easy opponent, Zhongxian had no intention of holding back either. With a flick of his left hand, the furious might of the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm rushed toward Zhong Yunfeng. At the same time, he also lifted his right hand and tapped forward. Grand Constellation Finger. Executing 2 Saint intermediate tier battle techniques simultaneously, Zhongxian had gone all out from the start. Who? Standing before the 2 attacks, Zhong Yunfeng leisurely took a step forward. Wang. As soon as the palm strike and the finger art came into contact with his dominion, they were immediately deflected just like how a river flow parted before a massive boulder. It didn't seem to have caused the slightest bit of effect on Zhong Yunfeng at all. This. Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. As expected of a Grand Dominion Realm expert of the Zhong clan, the other party was much more frightening than he had thought. What about this? With a furious roar, all kinds of attack burst forth from Zhongxian, palm strikes, punches, finger arts, and many more. In the blink of an eye, the entire dueling ring seemed to have been plunged into an ocean of zhunqi. Boom boom boom. The furious assault caused sonic booms to explode relentlessly in the air. Even if it was Zhongqian who had tapped into the power of his bloodline, he would have surely been sent into a fluster from this overwhelming barrage of attacks. But Zhong Yunfeng simply chuckled lightly and waved his hand lightly. Hula. Upon contact with his dominion, the barrage of attacks was deflected to his back as well, inducing countless ripples to diffuse on the seal around the dueling ring. He's still perfectly fine even after all that. Zhongxian felt as if his mind was going to explode. That was really way too overpowered. He thought that with that barrage of attacks, he would at least be able to tear open the other party's defenses. Yet, it barely did a thing at all. Was he really completely helpless before the other party without a sword in hand? I have already given you a chance to attack me, so it should be my turn now. After deflecting all of Zhong Xian's attacks, Zhong Yunfeng spoke up before tapping his finger forward. Tz la. A surge of pure energy immediately shot forth from the tip of his finger. Chem. Accelerated by Zhong Yunfeng's dominion, the surge of pure energy appeared right before Zhong Xian's chest in an instant. Realizing that he would have no time to dodge at all, he could only hurriedly raise his palm to defend himself. Tzzzz. The powerful momentum of the finger art traveled through Zhong Xian's palm and struck his body like a comet, forcefully pushing him back. As a result, a massive gorge was dragged out on the dueling ring. It took a great deal of effort before Zhong Xian was able to regain his balance once more. He felt his zhenqi running erratically in his body, and as if someone had scalded with palm with blazing inferno, an indescribable pain assaulted his hand. Even a simple finger art of his wields so much strength. Zhong Xian was alarmed. He might have successfully withstood the finger art, but if this were to go on, the duel would surely end with his loss. Not too bad. The fact that you were able to withstand my attack shows that you do have some capability. Zhong Yunfeng remarked as he raised his palm, preparing for the next attack. At this moment, however, the young man before him abruptly raised his hand up high. What's wrong? Are you going to surrender? Zhong Yunfeng asked with a contemptuous smile on his lips. That's not it. I just would like 10 breaths to myself. Zhong Xian replied. 10 breaths. I admit that I am not a match for you with my current strength. In any case, it's already unfair that a Grand Dominion Realm cultivator like you is facing a Primordial Spirit Realm cultivator like me at your full strength. So, I want 10 seconds to sort out my thoughts. Exhaling deeply, a smile emerged on Zhong Xian's lips as he continued, as well as to make a breakthrough while I'm at it. Chapter 1305 His bathing, make a breakthrough while he's at it. Is it possible to make a breakthrough as and when you like? What can he possibly do in just 10 breaths? It won't even be sufficient for a short toilet break. Upon hearing Zhong Xian's words, a huge commotion broke out beneath the stage. The various elders in the sky also looked at one another in confusion, uncomprehending of what the young man was up to. A typical cultivator would have to find an isolated chamber, prepare all kinds of cultivation resources, and condition his body for many days before attempting for a breakthrough, and yet, this fellow actually asked for a 10 breaths break from the battle in order to make a breakthrough. Do you think that making a breakthrough is as easy as breathing, able to do it as and when you like? Fine, I'll give you 10 seconds then. Let's see if you have the ability to make a breakthrough within this period of time. Zhong Yunfeng was startled for a moment before he nearly burst out laughing. He had seen plenty of eccentric people in his life, but the young man before him sure was one of kind. To ask for a 10 breaths break in the midst of a battle in order to make a breakthrough. Can you come up with something any more ridiculous than that? And even if you did manage to achieve a breakthrough, you would only be at half-leaving Aperture Realm. Do you think that you would be a match for me like that? Fine, I'll give you the time that you desire so much then. Let's see what you can do with it. Great. Zhong Xian nodded. Flicking his wrist, he took out the wintry spirit essence, uncorked the bottle, and swallowed it whole. That isn't for drinking. At the bottom of the dueling ring, Chen Liao saw that sight and nearly keeled over. The wintry spirit essence was a cold attribute spirit essence capable of freezing one's very blood and bones. Even the members of the Glacier Plain Court would just dab a little bit of it on their fingers and slowly absorb it over a very long period of time each time they cultivated. That bottle of wintry spirit essence was intended for several years of use, and yet, he actually swallowed it whole. While it was true that the wintry spirit essence was rich in spiritual energy, it was simply too cold. Swallowing it directly was worse than ingesting lethal poison directly. Putting aside a primordial spirit realm cultivator like you, even Grand Dominion realm experts would die from having their innards freezing over. Just what in the world are you doing? It was in view that the young man was her benefactor and the teacher of their young court chief that Chen Liao gave him a bottle of wintry spirit essence. If he were to die because of that, there was no way she would be able to escape responsibility. Gu. Just as Chen Liao was scared out of her wits, she saw that not only did the young man on the stage not turn into a sculpture of ice, the aura he emanated was even growing stronger by the moment. It felt almost as if a dam which had accumulated several decades' worth of water was beginning to shatter, ready to let loose a furious flood upon the world. Following which, with a resounding buzz, the young man successfully overcame the bottleneck of primordial spirit realm pinnacle and reached half-leaving aperture realm. Despite so, the advancement in his cultivation didn't stop just there. It continued surging forward furiously. 2 breaths later, he reached quasi-leaving aperture realm. This. Chen Liao's face paled, and her throat turned dry. Her eyes were bulging so much that it seemed as if they would plop out to the ground anytime soon. She was certain that the young man would be frozen to death by the cold energy of the wintry spirit essence, but not only was he fine, he even managed to swiftly assimilate the spirit essence into his body and advance his cultivation swiftly. Just what kind of constitution did he have? That was really frightening. Amidst her shock, Zhongxian's advancement in cultivation finally slowed to a halt. It seemed like he had finished devouring all of the spiritual energy contained within the wintry spirit essence. This. To achieve a breakthrough of 2 cultivation stages within 3 breaths. Isn't this a little too fast? Everyone stared at the sight before them in a daze. In the sky, Elder Liu and the others also nearly plummeted to the ground from shock. They thought that the young man asking for a break of 10 breaths was just a joke, but in just 3 breaths, he had already managed to advance his cultivation by 2 cultivation stages. And furthermore, from the looks of it, if not for the insufficient spiritual energy from the wintry spirit essence, he could have very well pushed for even higher realms. Zhong Yunfeng was also dumbfounded by how Zhongxian actually succeeded in achieving a breakthrough so swiftly, and a deep frown emerged on his forehead. But a short moment later, the frown gave way to a cold chuckle. You are merely at quasi-leaving aperture realm. Even if you did succeed in achieving a breakthrough, you still won't be able to defeat me with such strength. Even with 2 consecutive breakthroughs, that fellow would only be a mere quasi-leaving aperture realm. There was still a huge gap between the other party and a true Grand Dominion realm expert like him. Boom! All of a sudden, the deep rumbling of thunder abruptly bellowed in the sky above, and it took only a short moment for the clear skies to be covered in darkness. Raising his head anxiously, Zhong Yunfeng saw ominous clouds looming above the square. He can't be thinking of challenging the lightning ordeal here, could he? Zhong Yunfeng's body shuddered involuntarily upon that realization. To dare to draw out the lightning ordeal a moment right after you have reached quasi-leaving aperture realm. Do you know how frightening the lightning ordeal is? Primordial spirits were of the yin attribute, and they needed to be nourished by the lightning ordeal before they could make the transformation into the yang attribute. Only then would they be able to travel freely without being limited by their bodies. However, lightning was the natural nemesis to all beings of the yin attribute. Even Zhong Yunfeng had to reinforce his cultivation for more than half a year before daring to challenge the lightning ordeal, but even so, he still sustained grave injuries from it, nearly crippling himself for good. He had to rest for 3 whole months before he was able to recover back to full health. It was one thing for that fellow to rush his breakthroughs, but to actually draw in the lightning ordeal on top of that. Are you really that intent to die? That's too reckless, Zhao Xingmo exclaimed in horror. To be honest, it was no big deal for Zhongxian to lose the duel. After all, Zhong Yunfeng was ranked higher than him, so it wouldn't affect his status and prestige as a student of the elite division. There was really no need to take the risk and rush for a breakthrough at all. This was really a foolish action. Perhaps noticing Zhao Xingmo's worry, Zhong Zhouxiao consoled, "Don't worry, Zhongsha will be fine." Zhao Xingmo might not be aware of how monstrous Zhongxian was, but he had experienced it firsthand. So many times, he had worked hard to reinforce his cultivation so as to push for a breakthrough in hopes to surpassing Zhongxian, but in the end, the latter would just casually say, "I have accumulated enough," and easily achieve breakthrough after breakthrough, steadily widening the gap between the both of them. After all the traumas he had been through, there was no longer anything Zhongxian could do that would surprise him anymore. Admittedly, the situation occurring before him was inconceivable to him too. But considering that it was Zhongxian who stood at the eye of the storm, everything didn't seem as unbelievable anymore. After all, that young man was a celestial master teacher like Kongsha. How could an existence like that be gauged using the common sense of ordinary men? Fine. How could he be fine? Do you know that the very first leaving aperture ordeal is the most dangerous to a cultivator? There are countless geniuses in history who had died because of it. Just look at the dense congregation of storm clouds in the sky. I know that he's a person of great capability, but it takes only a moment of complacency to make an irreversible mistake. Zhao Xingmo bellowed anxiously. Besides, even if he were to survive the lightning ordeal, he would surely suffer grievous injuries too. Given so, how is he going to continue fighting against Zhong Yunfeng? Considering how powerful the leaving aperture ordeal was, it was inevitable that one would suffer great damage to one's primordial spirit. And considering how he was already outmatched when fighting at his full strength, how could he possibly be a match for a Grand Dominion realm expert when he was in a severely wounded state? Even without looking at the outcome, it was obvious what the conclusion of the duel would be. This time, even Zhong Zhouxiao was stumped. He had deep confidence in Zhong Xian, but given how disadvantageous the circumstances were to the latter, even he couldn't help but waver at this point in time. My heavens, has Zhong Xian gone mad? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Or is Zhong Shi trying to draw his primordial spirit out from his body? All of a sudden, a loud exclamation echoed through the square. Alarmed, Zhong Zhouxiao turned his head toward the sky and saw that Zhong Xian had drawn his primordial spirit out of his glabella, and in this very moment, his primordial spirit was charging right into the congregation of storm clouds. Is Zhong Shi intending to face the leaving aperture ordeal with his primordial spirit? But that would only put him in greater danger. Zhong Zhouxiao widened his eyes in shock. Considering that the primordial spirit was weak against lightning, a cultivator would stand a better chance at surviving the leaving aperture ordeal if he were to face the lightning tribulation with his primordial spirit housed within his body. This way, the body would at least help to block out a fair bit of the lightning. Back at the marshlands of the northern meadows, he had seen the deep agony that Hall Master Xing was put through from facing the lightning tribulation directly with his primordial spirit. Zhong Xian was present then as well, so he should be aware of the dangers of his actions. Why was he still taking such a risk then? While Zhong Zhouxiao was wondering if Zhong Xian had gone bonkers, the latter's primordial spirit had already charged right into the storm clouds. Countless streaks of lightning flashed within the clouds, fully displaying the treacherous environment within. Catcher! Catcher! Under the relentless lightning strike, Zhong Xian's primordial spirit began moving in a bizarre fashion, as if the lightning strike had caused him to lose control of himself. The leaving aperture ordeal is the first hurdle that Saint Realm experts would face. The violent energy harnessed within the lightning tribulation is simply too great such that most primordial spirits would end up succumbing it, resulting in dissipation. Yet, that fellow actually dashed right in complete unprepared. He really shouldn't have done that. Having gotten into the elite division, he had such a bright future lying before him, but now, recklessness is really the bane for all cultivators. Look at how he's convulsing uncontrollably. This is his very first lightning tribulation, so his primordial spirit wouldn't have the slightest resistance to lightning at all. Even if his primordial spirit doesn't dissipate from this, it's likely that his sanity would be wiped away by the violent force of the lightning ordeal. That fellow is really too hasty for success. Wait a moment, are you sure he's convulsing? Why doesn't it seem that way to me? Long sighs of lamentation sounded one after another from the crowd, but all of a sudden, the sudden exclamation left the entire crowd stunned for a moment. You're right. His primordial spirit isn't convulsing. It's more like. Half a breath later, another master teacher finished the sentence with a shrill voice. More like his bathing. Bathing? Bewildered by that perplexing remark, everyone quickly turned their gazes over, and indeed, there was something really amiss with the situation. The primordial spirit amidst the lightning clouds was moving around, but it wasn't a spasmodic movement. Rather, if they really had to describe it, it would be more of a rhythmic scrubbing movement, as if he was trying to spread the lightning equally throughout his body. As if he was trying to scrub it into the depths of his primordial spirit. Primordial spirits are naturally averse to lightning, but not only is he unfrightened, he's even heartily bathing in it. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? How could something like this possibly happen? Madness. This was truly madness. 3 breaths to push from primordial spirit pinnacle to quasi-leaving aperture realm, and even challenging the lightning tribulation face on straight afterward. Their minds could still accept it if Zhongxian managed to survive the leaving aperture ordeal by a close shot, but to be bathing so joyfully amidst it. No words could even begin to describe the emotions they were feeling at this very instant. This. Elder Liu gulped down a mouthful of saliva as his eyelids twitched uncontrollably. As an elder of the Sanctum of Sages, he had seen plenty of outstanding geniuses over the past several hundred years, such as the current head of the Zhong clan, the little princess of the Luo clan. They were all the most outstanding figures of the master-teacher continent, the stars that shone the brightest in the night sky. But, not even they dared to play with the leaving aperture ordeal like that. Elder Liu clawed at his hair frenziedly, tearing out huge patches of it. Zhong Yunfeng had frozen in shock from what he was seeing. He thought that it was utter foolishness of the young man to bring forth the lightning tribulation so casually, and that he was simply courting death. Yet, as if a resilient cockroach, the lightning ordeal didn't seem to faze him in the least. On the contrary, he was even having plenty of fun bathing. 10 breaths are up. This daze continued for quite a while before Zhong Yunfeng suddenly remembered the situation he was in and bellowed loudly. The primordial spirit in the sky seemed to have heard his voice and immediately stopped his scrubbing. He opened his mouth wide and devoured the entire sky of lightning through his mouth before dashing right back into his body. In the next moment, Zhongxian opened his eyes and looked at Zhong Yunfeng apologetically. "Pardon me. It was my first time experiencing the lightning tribulation, and I had a little too much fun that I accidentally took another additional breath. To make up to you, why don't I give you a 3 moves advantage?" Chapter 1306 Wave Treading Stride. It was a single breath more than what he had promised earlier, and the fact that the other party didn't try to assault him within this period of time was honestly praiseworthy. From the moment he said those words to his breakthrough and the lightning tribulation, a total of 11 breaths had passed. It was a single breath more than what he had promised earlier, and the fact that the other party didn't try to assault him within this period of time was honestly praiseworthy. No matter what, he must return the favor. "What did you say?" Zhong Yunfeng gritted his teeth so tightly as it felt as if they would chip under the immense force. It was just a moment ago that he thrashed Zhongxian upside down, but all of a sudden, Zhongxian was actually offering to give him a 3 moves advantage. That was blatantly underestimating him. "Make your move. I promise you that I won't retaliate in the next 3 moves you make." Zhongxian placed his hands behind his back and smiled. "You're really seeking death." Zhong Yunfeng couldn't suppress his rage any longer. While he wasn't one of the most talented individuals in the Zhong clan, he had a composed and steady personality. It was for this reason that he didn't rush into agreeing to help Zhongxian exact his vengeance. But Zhongxian's words had really struck the thorn in his heart this time around. For the longest of time, he had been extremely concerned about the widening gap between him and the other geniuses of the Zhong clan, and Zhongxian's casual attitude and words of underestimation only served to further remind him of the matter. In an instant, rage consumed his entirety, and he couldn't help but want to tear the young man before him into shreds. Tzzzzzzzz. Zhong Yunfeng began walking forward slowly. Even though he was walking atop the smooth dueling ring, somehow, his movements felt as if he was riding upon a wave. Despite his slow speed, there was an imposing momentum behind his movement reminiscent of the choppy waters of a stormy sea. Previously, in view of his standing, he had decided to hold himself back a little. However, now that he had decided to go all out, his overwhelming strength immediately showed through. It's the Zhong clan's wave treading stride. Rumors have it that the wave treading stride was created by an elder in the Zhong clan while he was observing a water strider moving along the ripples in the water. Not only were its movements agile, it was also well poised for offense and defense, similar to a leaf floating atop the ocean. No matter how treacherous the waves get, it would still remain afloat. This technique is similar to shadow tracking, but it's much more profound and grander. Since Zhong Yunfeng has gone to the extent of using this technique, it seems like he has started getting serious. Zhongxian is likely going to be defeated. His ability to withstand the lightning tribulation is indeed incredible, but a cultivation of leaving aperture realm primary stage is just too low. Discussions broke out amidst the crowd. While Zhongxian's breakthroughs were shocking, in their view, it was likely that Zhongxian had just reinforced his cultivation immensely over the months, thus allowing him to easily take this final step forward in this critical juncture. As formidable as Zhongxian had performed in the lightning tribulation, his true strength was still bound to be lacking as compared to the genius of the Zhong clan, especially given the huge disparity in their cultivation realms. I shall make you regret looking down on me. Zhong Yunfeng raised his palm and forcefully pushed it down upon Zhongxian. This palm may seem unimpressive on the surface, but as the one standing before it, Zhongxian felt as if a torrential tsunami was towering before him, inducing a slight feeling of helplessness in him. Saint Intermediate Tier Battle Technique, Air Propulsion Palm. Completely overwhelmed with anger, Zhong Yunfeng didn't bother to hold back at all. In an instant, Zhong Yunfeng had turned the dueling ring reminiscent to the bottom of an ocean. Any movement made within the range of his attack would require his permission. Not bad. Zhongxian remarked calmly with his hands still beneath his back. With an agile flit, he dodged Zhong Yunfeng's lethal attack and materialized at the other end of the dueling ring. After achieving a breakthrough to leaving aperture realm primary stage, his fighting prowess had increased by at least twofold. While he hadn't really tried out how powerful he was at the moment, he was confident that if he were to use his full strength, Zhong Yunfeng wouldn't stand a chance at all. It was for this very reason that Zhongxian dared to give the other party a 3 moves advantage. While he only had the primordial spirit realm Heaven's Path divine art with him at the moment, the leaving aperture realm cultivation technique manual books he had collected back at Qianchong Empire's black market, along with those he had obtained from Ji Lingfeng's storage ring, had given him a deep insight leaving aperture realm. Even though they weren't sufficient to form the leaving aperture realm Heaven's Path divine art, he was still able to compile out a decently wholesome cultivation technique manual. Furthermore, his diligent cultivation over the past few days had firmly reinforced his cultivation. It was due to all of these factors that he was able to push for multiple breakthroughs so easily after ingesting the potent wintry spirit essence. As for the lightning tribulation, he had gone through the Saint Ascension ordeal, which granted him significant resistance toward lightning. On top of that, as he cultivated the Heaven's Path soul art, his primordial spirit was already young in nature. As a result, the lightning tribulation which all cultivators were so frightened of was actually nothing more than a walk in the park for him. This was also the reason why the bathing scene earlier occurred. He wasn't showing off but attempting to spread the lightning over his primordial spirit in the shortest time possible so as to best temper his primordial spirit. Even so, he still exceeded the time by a single breath. How embarrassing. As for his massive soul, he had used the heavenly art of dimension unravel to compress it into a smaller form so that it wouldn't stand out too much. Otherwise, if a 10 meters large primordial spirit were to slip out of his body, there was no saying that the lightning tribulation might even be scared into escaping. Do you think that I would let you run away? Seeing that Zhongxian had dodged his first attack, Zhong Yunfeng narrowed his eyes and flicked his finger toward the sky. Tz la. A powerful sword chi burst into the heavens. From this move, it could be seen that his comprehension of swordsmanship had reached a decent level as well upper sword heart. Woo woo woo. Halfway through its trajectory, the sword chi abruptly burst into several hundred surges of smaller sword chi, scattered all around the area as they surged for Zhongxian. A battle technique. Zhongxian was slightly surprised. He thought that it was only a casual flick of sword chi, but the move turned out to be a battle technique too. While the splitting of the sword chi would result in each of them harnessing significantly weaker might, such a barrage of attack was more effective in inducing panic in the opponent. In a fight between experts, one's state of mind was extremely important too. As soon as the opponent started to lose his composure, one would be able to drag him into one's momentum and influence his movements, thus gaining full control over the flow of the battle. But while such a move might have incredible effects when directed toward other opponents, it wasn't too effective against Zhongxian. With another flit, Zhongxian arrived at the other end of the dueling ring, evading every single one of those mini sword chi cleanly. Is dodging the only thing you are capable of? Zhong Yunfeng harumphed coldly. 2 moves had already passed, But he didn't even come close to catching the young man's shadow. This had borne some feelings of frustration within him. I said that I would give you a 3 moves advantage, so of course, I won't back down on my words. Zhong Xian said with a soft chuckle. You. Zhong Yunfeng's face reddened in rage. Unable to take it anymore, he charged forth once more. This time, his speed was several-fold faster than before. It was still far from a match against Zhong Xian's unbounded treader in terms of speed, but it was definitely far faster than ordinary movement techniques. What incredible speed! What movement technique is that? It's the highest level of mastery of the wave treading stride, rippleless treading. He actually cultivated the wave treading stride to the highest level. As expected of a genius from the Zhong clan, a few amongst the crowd recognized the movement technique that Zhong Yunfeng was using, and shock surfaced on their faces. Wave treading stride, this was an extremely difficult movement technique to master. Not only was it highly demanding on one's talent, it also took many experimentation and practice before one could grasp the feeling of it. Yet, to be able to reach rippleless treading, the highest level of the technique, at such a young age, it must be said that Zhong Yunfeng was truly an outstanding individual. Hoo-la! Amidst shocked gazes, Zhong Yunfeng had already arrived at an area less than 5 meters away from Zhong Xian. With a shrill buzz, he activated his dominion, and it swiftly engulfed Zhong Xian as well. In an instant, Zhong Xian felt immense pressure crushing him from all directions. It was as if he was grasped in the palm of another, unable to move at all. His indeed formidable. Zhong Xian's face turned livid. Typically speaking, at St. Six Dan primary stage, a cultivator would have just formed his dominion, and it would assume a form reminiscent of flowing water, so the pressure it could exert wouldn't be as great. At later stages, it would take a form reminiscent of a bog, followed by mercury, and finally lead. As one progressed through the various cultivation stages of St. Six Dan, the prowess of one's dominion would grow significantly stronger. As such, even though the radius of one's dominion would barely change at all, it was rather easy to classify its strength. While Zhong Yunfeng was only at St. Six Dan primary stage, his dominion was already extremely compact and dense, such that even Zhong Xian would have some trouble trying to blast it apart. It was a grave mistake to give me a 3 moves advantage. Since that's the case, you need not dream about making a move at all. Zhong Yunfeng bellowed coldly as he struck his palm down upon Zhong Xian. Augmented by the strength of his dominion, this palm strike was at least 2 times as powerful as before. Even before it reached its target, its sheer might would have already suppressed one's soul and physical body, destroying any thoughts of retaliation in one's mind. Raising his head, all Zhong Xian could see was a dark shadow looming above him. His movements were restricted by Zhong Yunfeng's dominion, preventing him from escaping at all. If it had been a moment before, there is no way I'll be able to withstand that palm strike without counterattacking. But now, there wasn't any hint of nervousness to be seen on Zhong Xian's face, and he showed no signs of counterattacking either. Instead, he simply hugged his body together to protect the vitals of his body. He can't be dreaming of facing the attack head-on like that, can he? Even Grand Dominion realm cultivators would be unable to withstand that blow from Zhong Yunfeng. To attempt to withstand it without putting up any significant defenses at all, is he courting death? I really don't know whether to say that the fellow is fearless or plain dumb. Upon seeing Zhong Xian's actions, the crowd fell into a daze. If one were to execute a battle technique within one's dominion, the might of the battle technique could be easily enhanced to 2-fold stronger than before. Zhong Yunfeng's air propulsion palm wielded devastating might even without his dominion, and yet, Zhong Xian was actually intending on taking it face-on. If things were to go wrong, he might even be smacked to his death. Should we intervene in the duel? Elder Han Zhu watched on the situation in jitters. There's no need for that. Zhong Yunfeng isn't a reckless person. He won't kill another candidate right before us. Elder Liu's fists were also tightly clenched despite his words, and there was a contemplative gleam in his eyes which made one wonder what he was thinking about. Voila! Amidst shocked gazes, Zhong Yunfeng's palm landed squarely on Zhong Xian's back, and amidst a resounding sonic boom, a powerful blast of shockwave swept into the surroundings. It's over. Seeing that the young man who had just achieved consecutive breakthroughs really didn't attempt to dodge at all, many amongst the crowd couldn't help but cover their eyes with a cringe, not daring to see what had just happened. However, before they could hear an anticipated cry of agony from the young man, another explosion abruptly sounded, and a deep groan escaped from Zhong Yunfeng's throat instead. Quickly turning their eyes over once more, they saw the genius of the Zhong clan retreating in a fluster with a pale face. His hands were trembling non-stop, and his eyes were marked with horror. What happened? Those who had covered their eyes before didn't see what had happened previously, and they were baffled by the abrupt change in circumstances. "It's the lightning tribulation," a master teacher amidst the crowd exclaimed in agitation. "Lightning tribulation? That's right. Just a moment ago, Zhongxian's primordial spirit devoured the entire sky of lightning, but instead of assimilating it, he allowed it to wrap itself all over his body instead. Not only was Zhong Yunfeng's palm strike neutralized by that very lightning, he even suffered a backlash from his attack. Just look at his pale face. I reckon that his primordial spirit has suffered significant damage from that previous move," the master teacher remarked excitedly. "You said that he allowed the lightning tribulation to wrap itself all around his body so as to use it to protect himself?" The crowd staggered on the spot. It was true to devouring lightning would help to temper one's physical body and primordial spirit, but there was a huge problem in that course of action. It was extremely difficult to release the accumulated lightning within one's body. Over time, it could slowly wear down one's body, causing significant damage to one. But when Zhong Yunfeng's palm strike fell on Zhongxian, he ended up drawing away the lightning within the latter's body, thus sparing the latter from the agony of the lightning while significantly injuring himself. It was two birds in a stone for Zhongxian. Could it be that Zhongxian had guessed that Zhong Yunfeng would utilize this palm strike, so he intentionally gave the latter a 3 moves advantage in hopes of using the latter's strength to draw out the lightning within his body after tempering his body and soul? Someone suddenly shouted out. In an instant, looks of disbelief and horror appeared on the faces of every single expert in the square. If that was really an intentional act on Zhongxian's part, that would really be terrifying. That would mean that not only did he grasp the might of the lightning tribulation well, he had also seen right through Zhong Yunfeng's strength and personality as well. Otherwise, if anything were to go wrong, the one who would be severely injured would be Zhongxian himself. Can he still be considered a human? Upon realizing what was going on, the crowd gulped down a mouthful of saliva as they glanced at one another. A deep fear rose from the depths of their souls. It was one thing to be highly talented, but to be able to keenly see right through others as well. If they were to face Zhongxian in a battle as well, would they stand a chance at all? Chapter 1307. Here comes my sword sheath, This is exactly the aspect about Zhongshe that amazes others without fear. No matter how inconceivable a feat is, he's able to pull it off with perfect ease using unconventional methods. Zhong Jiuxiao's eyes gleamed in admiration. As an offspring of the Zhong clan, he had grown up hearing about the greatness of the young prodigy. As a result, he had grown up admiring the talents of the young prodigy, but in this moment, there was no one else in his eyes but Zhongxian. No matter how formidable the young prodigy was, it was all based on the purity of his bloodline. How could he possibly compare to Zhongxian? With sufficient time, Zhong Jiuxiao had no doubt that Zhongxian would be able to exceed the young prodigy and reach the very pinnacle of the world. He's indeed exceptional. Zhao Xingmo muttered in a daze. From the moment Zhongxian managed to defeat him easily during the preliminary selection, he had already known that the young man was anything but normal. He couldn't have imagined that the young man would be so abnormal. From the current looks of it, he would be able to forge a legend for himself even in the sanctum of sages, where geniuses were aplenty. You have had your 3 moves. It's my turn. Zhongxian loosened his huddled body and stretched his neck before speaking with a grin. The attack from the lightning tribulation was indeed within his calculations. He had compiled a book on Zhong Yunfeng through the Library of Heaven's Path, and there were several hundred flaws reflected there. Picking one of them out and designing a scheme to do him in was, honestly, not that difficult. Su. With a swift movement reminiscent of a streak of lightning, he dashed right up to Zhong Yunfeng and stabbed his finger forward. Voila! A brilliant burst of sword chi reminiscent of a shooting star shot forth, and upon contact with the latter's dominion, it easily creating an opening and pushed ahead. Back when he was still at primordial spirit realm pinnacle, his strength was still too weak to overcome Zhong Yunfeng's dominion. However, after the consecutive breakthroughs, his strength had already surpassed the limits of the latter's dominion, such that it couldn't impede him any longer. Break. Seeing how the sword chi actually managed to breach the defenses of his dominion, cold sweat immediately rained down Zhong Yunfeng's forehead. With a flick of his palm, he hurriedly took out a sheathed sword to fend against the sword chi. Ding ding ding. The sword chi collided with the sword sheath and produced a resounding sonic boom before dissipating entirely. On the other hand, Zhong Yunfeng was forced to retreat 2 steps before he was able to ward off the might of the sword chi. He used a weapon? Considering that it's supposed to be a fair duel, his act of drawing a weapon should suffice for this duel to be ruled as his loss. Those of the sage clans possess innumerable powerful artifacts in their possession. If artifacts were to be allowed in the duel, it would become a battle of wealth instead of a battle of strength. Even though Zhong Yunfeng didn't draw his sword out of his sheath, his very act of taking out a weapon still induced a wave of disapproval from the crowd. Offspring of the sage clans had no lack of good artifacts. Any single one of them could easily drive others into despair. For this reason, even though there was no explicit rules banning the usage of artifacts in the challenge of the defeated, there was a tacit agreement amongst the candidates against it. On the dueling ring, Zhong Yunfeng paid no heed to the commotion of the crowd beneath and quickly popped a pill into his mouth in order to recover from the injuries he had sustained from the lightning tribulation. After which, he turned to Zhongxian and said, "I must admit, you are indeed a formidable adversary. I might have drawn my weapon, but you don't have to worry. I know that you are a cultivator from Qingyuan Empire, so I won't bully you either. This sword of mine is known as Glacial Frost, and it's a half-saint high-tier artifact. It would be indeed unfair for me to fight you with it, but its sheath is only at saint intermediate tier. I'll just use this sheath, but you can use any weapon you want." After which, Zhong Yunfeng pulled out his sheath and wielded it. A surge of concentrated sword intent flowed forth from him, emanating a great pressure on those standing before it. Even though he was armed with a sheath instead of a sword, his sheer mastery in swordsmanship enhanced his fighting prowess by more than 2-fold. He's only going to use his sheath. Well, considering that his sheath is a saint intermediate tier artifact, I guess that it would still be acceptable since he won't be relying on the superior strength of his weapon to achieve victory. On top of being a talented sword practitioner himself, he practices the profound sword arts of the Zhong clan too. If Zhongxian were to accept the duel, there was no way he would be a match. I've heard of how frightening the Zhong clan's swordsmanship is as well. Zhongxian won't stand much of a chance against it. Such mutterings could be heard from the crowd. As a half-saint high-tier artifact, once the Glacial Frost Sword was drawn, there would be no cultivator of the same cultivation realm as Zhong Yunfeng who could match him, much less Zhongxian. Naturally, the circumstances would be extremely unfair to Zhongxian. However, if Zhong Yunfeng were to wield only the sheath of his sword whereas Zhongxian could choose to use any weapon of the same tier, the duel could still be considered to be fair. How about it? Do you dare to fight me? Zhong Yunfeng looked at Zhongxian with a hint of provocation in his eyes. "You're only going to use your sword sheath?" Zhongxian frowned. "That's right. You don't have to feel restrained by me, you can use any weapon you want," Zhong Yunfeng replied, heaping even more pressure on Zhongxian to accept the duel. "We have already competed on movement techniques and battle techniques, so shouldn't we compete on our weapon mastery as well? After all, only with a weapon in hand can a cultivator display his true fighting prowess. Besides, what I specialize in isn't barehanded combat either." This. Zhongxian revealed a hint of hesitation. Indeed. With a weapon in hand, a person's fighting prowess could potentially rise exponentially. Take Zheng Yang for example, without his spear in hand, there was no way he could have cleared the Dragon Gate formation and become the progeny of combat. Personally speaking, Zhongxian rarely used any weapons because his opponent tended to be too weak. After all, why go through the trouble of holding a weapon when a punch was sufficient to resolve the problem? May I first take a look at your prowess with the sheath before deciding whether I should use one or not? Zhong Xian pondered for a moment before asking. If Zhong Yunfeng's prowess with a weapon was formidable, he could still consider wielding a weapon. Otherwise, there was really no need to take out the Lingshu sword for something as minor as this. After all, it wasn't really his hobby to bully the weak. You want to take a look at my prowess with a weapon? All right then, I'll grant your wish. With a light chuckle, Zhong Yunfeng pushed his palm forward, and his sheath immediately flew forth like a prowling snake pouncing upon its prey. This was a rather peculiar move, carrying distinctive traits of both swordsmanship and spearmanship. It was ingeniously angled in a manner that aimed to seal multiple acupoints at once. If the strike were to really land on its target, the target would surely be incapacitated, losing all fighting prowess and even sustaining severe injuries. Not bad, Zhong Xian remarked as he flicked his fingers forward. Multiple sword qi sprung forth, blocking the way of Zhong Yunfeng's sheath. Ding 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 ding, it was a melody similar to a torrential shower raining down upon a roof. Watching as the sword qi clashed against his sheath, Zhong Yunfeng's eyebrows shot up as he pushed his palm up. Hua la! With a powerful sweeping movement, the sheath forcefully deflected the sword qi on it back toward Zhong Xian. Facing this sight, Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes and quickly retreated. It was no wonder why Zhong Yunfeng proposed fighting with their weapons. In just a single encounter, it was already apparent that he was extraordinarily gifted in weaponry. Even though he was only armed with a sheath, his pierce was as sharp as a spear, his sweep was as forceful as a pole, and every single maneuver was conducted with the agility and flexibility of a sword. With all these three coming together in a sword art, it became a technique nigh impossible to guard against. Despite cultivating the Heaven's Path battle techniques of numerous weapons, Zhong Xian still found himself in a fluster for a short moment there. It seemed like weapon battles were really where Zhong Yunfeng's true forte lay. Hula. However, despite how swiftly Zhong Xian was retreating, the sheath seemed to move at an even swifter speed, pursuing closely behind him. No matter how he attempted to swerve and dodge, he was unable to escape from the pursuit of the sheath. That is, wave treading stride. He actually managed to infuse the movement technique into the manipulation of his weapon? Elder Liu exclaimed in astonishment. Wave treading stride was a movement technique that made use of the momentum of the opponent in order to advance or retreat, reminiscent of how a water strider drifted along with the waves. As a movement technique, it was developed with the intention of facilitating the movement of a cultivator. Yet, who could have thought that Zhong Yunfeng would have actually integrated the technique into the manipulation of his weapon as well? If Zhong Xian couldn't find a way to knock away the sheath, it would continue following him as if a shadow. No matter where he escaped to or how fast he moved even, it would track his movements tightly, unable to be shaken off. Hoo. Over on the dueling ring, Zhong Xian had come to the same realization as well. Thus, he executed the unbounded treader and flitted away. In the blink of an eye, he appeared at the other end of the stage. At the same, he raised his palm and thrust it forward. Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow Palm. Due to the excessively swift movements of the unbounded treader, the sheath found itself unable to catch up for a moment when it was abruptly faced with the overwhelming strength of the palm strike. Colliding face-on with it, a resounding explosion sounded. Following which, intense shockwaves rippled from the collision, causing the entire dueling ring to shake non-stop. With this abrupt intervention, the sheath was forcefully shook out of its previous state. How about it? Does my prowess with a weapon in hand satisfy your criteria? Retracting his sheath, Zhong Yunfeng asked with a hint of pride in between his brows. He had viewed his ability to integrate wave treading stride into the utilization of weapons as one of his greatest pride, and indeed, it was something worth being proud about as well. Not too bad. Zhong Xian nodded earnestly. Using just a mere sword sheath, Zhong Yunfeng was actually able to leave him in a fluster for a moment there, nearly trapping him. Truly, as expected of a genius of the Zhong clan. The means that he possessed were indeed formidable. Do you dare to fight against me for a round? You appear to be rather proficient in swordsmanship, so I presume that you are a powerful sword practitioner yourself too. Since that's the case, Your fighting prowess should be much greater with a sword in hand, right? Zhong Yunfeng continued. I'm indeed more powerful with a sword in hand, but my weapon is a little too powerful. I'm afraid that it will be unfair for you, Zhong Xian said with a conflicted look. Why don't I use my sword sheath as well? You are going to use your sheath too? A disdainful sneer escaped Fro Zhong Yunfeng's lips. What I have shown you earlier is just the tip of the iceberg of my ability with a sword. In a real battle, I'll be far stronger than that. If you were to only wield a sheath as well, I fear that you might be severely injured in the battle. That won't happen, you don't have to worry about that. Even without drawing my sword, I'm still plenty formidable. Zhong Xian replied to Zhong Yunfeng's words with a leisurely smile. Oh, very well, let me witness the prowess you are able to bring forth with just your sheath then. Harumphing coldly, Zhong Yunfeng raised his arms, and a powerful aura burst forth from him. He had started practicing weaponry from a very young age, be it saber, spear, sword, halberd, pole. He had some degree of mastery in every single one of these conventional weapons, which was also how he could give spirit to a seemingly ordinary sheath, granting it strength that would make it invincible in its power class. And yet, the other party actually wanted to face him with a sword sheath as well. Are you joking with me? Since you are that arrogant, let me put you back in your place then. You shall know that not everyone can be like me, Zhong Yunfeng, displaying superior prowess even with just a mere sword sheath equipped in hand. Are you certain that you want us to fight using sword sheaths? Zhong Xian asked hesitantly. Of course, you were the one who said you want to use a sword sheath too. Zhong Yunfeng sneered coldly. Why? Are you planning on backing down at this point? It's not that. I'm just a little worried. Well, look out then. I'll be taking out my sword sheath now. With a conflicted expression on his face, Zhong Xian flicked his wrist. Hoo-la! Zhong Yunfeng was startled for a moment before he felt a mighty gale gushing at him. Raising his head, he saw a round platform several meters in radius falling right for his head. Pada! Before he could even process what was going on, he was already smacked onto the ground in a shape. His feet, which were barely exposed at the end of the round platform, were twitching non-stop, at least a consoling indication that the poor man beneath was still alive. Nevertheless, this smack should have rendered him incapable of fighting anymore. Seeing that the other party wasn't even able to take a single one of his attacks, Zhong Xian scratched his head and said with a flat tone, I should have warned you beforehand. My sheath is a little bigger than the others. Chapter 1308 Accommodation. For many millenniums, the Lingshu sword had been sealed in a mechanical stone platform. Back when he took the Lingshu sword, Zhong Xian did not neglect to take the stone platform with him as well to serve as the sheath. As the stone platform was the work of a celestial designer, it was not ranked in the same manner as artifacts usually were. Nevertheless, if one really had to assign a tier to it, it was definitely insufficient to be considered a saint high-tier artifact. Thus, from such a perspective, Zhong Xian could not be considered to be cheating. Just that, the stone platform was exceptionally heavy, and even Grand Dominion realm experts would have trouble lifting it. Otherwise, there was no way it could have kept the Lingshu sword sealed in place for so many years either. The fact that Zhong Yunfeng was able to survive having it smacked over him was already a huge blessing in itself. That's his sword sheath. There's really a sword inserted on top of it. But why in the world does he have such a massive sword sheath? Poor Zhong Yunfeng. There was a brief moment of silence beneath the dueling ring, and everyone gulped subconsciously as they stared at the sight before them with twitching eyes. This is too shameless. The other party was holding a perfectly normal-sized sheath, but you took out such a massive one. Who in the world would be able to withstand that? At the same time, there were many candidates who heaved a huge sigh of relief as well. It was fortunate that they did not foolishly step forward to challenge Zhong Xian, or else the one lying beneath that slab of stone could have been them. In any case, while Zhong Xian's actions were unconventional, there was no questioning that it was within the scope of the rules that Zhong Yunfeng had come up with. Furthermore, Zhong Xian had even given a warning in advance. Ultimately, Zhong Yunfeng only had himself to blame for his tragic plight. Paying no heed to the shocked crowd, Zhong Xian casually flicked his hand and returned his sword sheath back to his storage ring, revealing the poor man crushed beneath. Zhong Yunfeng's tongue was stuck out, his eyes had rolled backward, and his body was twisted like a dough stick. The deep fear that he felt prior to being knocked out was still firmly etched on his face. His current state was truly wretched. Just as Zhong Xian was about to infuse a surge of heaven's path Shenqi into Zhong Yunfeng's body to heal his injuries, a powerful gust of wind suddenly blew, and a young man leaped onto the dueling ring. "Hold it right there," the young man yelled with a livid expression on his face. After which, the young man walked over to Zhong Yunfeng and placed his fingers on the latter's acupoints. Upon realizing that the latter had only lost consciousness and that his wounds were not too severe, the young man heaved a sigh of relief. He fed a pill into Zhong Yunfeng's mouth before waving his hand, and Zhong Yunfeng's body slowly floated into the sky before drifting into the crowd below. "Thank you for going easy on Yunfeng. I am Zhong Zhuo, Yunfeng's cousin. Allow me to apologize for Yunfeng's previous rashness." Zhong Zhuo clasped his fist as he spoke. The impassive look on his face made it hard to discern whether it was an earnest apology or a threatening remark. Nevertheless, Zhong Xian still responded politely with a nod. He remembered seeing Zhong Zhuo's name on the list of candidates who made it into the elite division. He had finished in 31st place. "It's impressive that you possess such strength at your age despite coming from the Qingyuan Empire. If there's an opportunity in the future, I would be delighted to trade blows with you. However, I think that most of our fellow peers here must be exhausted from the entrance examination and are eager to rest, so let's not keep them any longer. Farewell." After saying those words, Zhong Zhuo turned around and leaped down from the dueling ring. His movements were exceptionally nimble, perhaps a sign that he possessed exceptional capability in movement techniques. Since Zhong Zhuo had departed as well, Zhong Xian knew that there was no point in him remaining on the dueling ring any longer. Thus, he turned around and returned to his seat. With the current fight concluded, Elder Liu turned to the crowd and asked if there were any other challengers. A couple of candidates stood forward, unwilling to part with this hard-to-come-by opportunity to rise through the ranks. Even though Zhong Xian had used questionable methods to knock out Zhong Yunfeng previously, his ability to break through Zhong Yunfeng's dominion still bore testimony to his true strength. As such, there were no ordinary division students who were so foolish as to challenge him anymore. By the second hour, there were no more challengers. So, Elder Liu stepped forward with a smile and said, "All right. Your accommodations have been prepared, and you can check them on your identity token. Lessons will officially start tomorrow, and you will be expected to report to your classes. So, take the chance to rest well today." The crowd swiftly nodded in response. Zhong Xian took out his identity token, and when he scanned it with his spiritual perception, a road leading to his accommodation appeared. "Let's go." Beckoning Zhong Zhuoxiao along, Zhong Xian began making his way over to the Sanctum of Sages. Across the square, there were a set of towering doors with the words Sanctum of Sages written on a plaque above. By the right side was the word Confucianism. Zhong Xian could not tell what level of painting it was, but the conception behind those words was extremely deep, to the point that it felt as if he was seeing an entire world through those words. These words were left behind by the first sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, Sage Kuei. Studying these characters will be highly beneficial to furthering one's comprehension of painting, Zhong Zhuoxiao told Zhong Xian with a hint of excitement in his voice. As a 7-star pinnacle painter himself, he knew how valuable these words were. Without a doubt, high-level paintings were definitely hard to come by. After all, there were only so many high-ranked painters on the master-teacher continent. Even though those words had been there for several dozen millenniums, there was not the slightest hint of damage on them. They still looked as wholesome and fresh as if they had just been written a moment ago. These words are able to absorb spiritual energy in order to heal any wear and tear on the ink, Zhong Xian noted. He could not have expected that the fellow who had been busy whittling a metal bar into a needle in the folded space would actually have such a deep comprehension of painting, capable of writing words with such deep conception. Had he known it in advance, he would not have spent his time sleeping. If he had spent that time learning painting from the other party, he might have been able to make significant advancements in that occupation. Knowing that those words would not escape from the entrance and he would have plenty of chances to study them in the future, Zhong Zhouxiao's gaze did not linger on them. Instead, eyes reddened in agitation, he looked at the tall doors before him and exclaimed, "So, this is the highest training institute on the master-teacher continent. Sanctum of Sages, I'm finally here." Born in a side family of the Zhong clan, he had put in so much more effort than the members of the main family in order to obtain what came easily to them. Wanting to be recognized by the Zhong clan, he had traveled down to the Qingyuan Empire many years ago, just to vie for the slot that he would never obtain from the Zhong clan. For a very long time, he had viewed getting into the Sanctum of Sages as his dream, but he also knew too well how difficult it would be to do so. He had devoted his heart and soul to it, but not once did he dare bear too much hope, fearing that the disappointment upon failure would crush his soul. However, after going through so much, he had still finally accomplished his dream. Perhaps it was because he had seen through Zhong Zhouxiao's feelings, Zhong Xian suddenly spoke up. "A powerful bloodline will only put you at a starting line above others. Ultimately, to reach the top, you can only rely on yourself." There was no one in that world who did not desire a superior constitution, an overpowered bloodline, and outstanding talent. However, those would only put one at a higher starting point than others. In order to reach the very peak, what was more important was undying perseverance and unyielding diligence. Zhong Xian, for example, did not possess outstanding talent, a formidable teacher, or an overpowered bloodline. In fact, it would be no exaggeration to say that he had started from zero. Yet, he still managed to slowly take one step forward at a time from the Tianqian kingdom to the Sanctum of Sages. This was not because he possessed astounding talent that far surpassed the others or that he had exceptionally good luck that would get him out of every single quandary he faced. Rather, it was because he had an unyielding heart that pushed him forward relentlessly. Without such an intense desire to grow, it was impossible for one to become a true expert. "Yes." Zhong Zhouxiao nodded. As soon as they walked into the Sanctum of Sages, the first thing that they noticed was that the concentration of spiritual energy in the surroundings was many times higher compared to a moment prior. On top of that, there was a unique aura drifting in the area that seemed to refresh one's mind, granting greater clarity of thought. No wonder it can draw so many humans in. It's indeed a blessed land for cultivation. Rich in spiritual energy, as long as Zhong Xian could gather the required Heaven's Path divine arts, even if he did not go through the trouble to search for spirit stones, he would still be able to advance his cultivation swiftly. In 10 years, he would still be able to become a 9-star master teacher and stand at the peak of the world. The place where he was living was not located too far away from the entrance. Following the directions on the jade token, he soon arrived at a residence. The concentration of spiritual energy within the residence was even more impressive. Even a non-cultivating human would be able to enjoy an increased lifespan and gain immunity to all diseases by walking in the area. By this moment, Zhong Zhouxiao had already parted from him. As the latter was a student in the ordinary division, he could only live in the shared dormitory. Naturally, the privileges of the two could not be compared. In a sense, the system was rather similar to that of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. The top students were granted accommodation in manor-like residences, whereas ordinary students could only live in shared dormitories. However, while Zhong Xian's lodging was much better than most of the other students, as he was ranked at the very last in the entrance examination, the residence he was allocated was located at one of the more remote edges, and it was the worst one out of the many others. Walking up to the gates of the residence, Zhong Xian took out his jade token, and the seal immediately opened. Zhong Xian pushed the door open, and just as he was about to walk in, an elegant figure suddenly walked up to the residence beside him and stopped. It was the young lady from the Glacier Plain Court, Chen Liao. Zhong Xian clasped his fist and said, "Fairy Liao, thank you for your words of advice during the duel." If not for the other party informing him that the Zhong clan's bloodline ability was time compression, he would have taken a bit more effort to defeat Zhong Qian. "Zhongshu, you are too polite," Chen Liao quickly replied. "I was only doing what I should do." The young man before her was the teacher of their young court chief, and she was also indebted to him due to his revision of the yin formula. To be honest, she felt a little embarrassed that she had not stepped forward to help him when he was in a difficult position. Watching as the young lady unlocked the adjacent residence, Zhongxian asked in puzzlement, "Is this where you are staying?" He was in the very last place of the elite division, so it was only given that he was allocated the residence at the very corner. However, he was certain that Chen Liao's ranking was in the 30s, so it did not make sense that they were living adjacent to one another. "I heard that Zhongshe was staying here, so I swapped with another person," Chen Liao said with a smile. Considering that the adjacent residence was the accommodation of the person ranked 49th, it went without saying that the person had been more than willing to make the swap with Chen Liao. Swap? Zhongxian was slightly startled to hear that. "Yes. You are the teacher of our young court chief, and you have resolved the most major problem of our cultivation techniques, so you are my benefactor too. If there's anything you need, feel free to request it of me. I'll rush over and have it done as soon as possible," Chen Liao said with a smile. Actually, a greater part of the reason was that she was worried that the Zhong clan would make things difficult for Zhongxian. By living in the adjacent residence, she would be able to look out for him. No matter what, she was the one who had caused the conflict between them. "You're too polite." At this point, Zhongxian came to a realization. That explained why the young lady's attitude toward him had changed all of a sudden. She had realized that he was Zhao Yue's teacher. The reason he dared not say that Zhao Yue was his student was because he feared that an ordinary disciple of the Glacier Plain Court would not be aware of the matter, and it would only worsen the conflict between the both of them. However, since the young lady was aware of it, that made things much easier. "Since you know of the relationship between Zhao Yue and me, may I ask if you have a long-distance jade communication token or something of the sort? I would like to speak a few words to her, if that isn't a problem." Zhongxian immediately looked at Chen Liao expectantly. Back then, when Zhao Yue left, he still did not have a communication jade token to give her. Besides, even if he did, considering the vast distance that sat between them, there was no way his messages could have gotten to her. Since the young lady before him was a disciple of the Glacier Plain Court, she was bound to have a channel of communication to contact the headquarters. Perhaps, she might just be able to put him in contact with Zhao Yue. After half a year apart, it would have been a lie if he said that he did not miss his student. "I do have a long-distance jade communication token here, but from the Sanctum of Sages, it would have to be augmented by a supporting formation before it can reach our young court chief. This supporting formation isn't easy to set up, and due to my lacking cultivation, I will require 3 months at the minimum," Chen Liao said. 3 months. An inconspicuous hint of a frown emerged on Zhongxian's forehead. "May I know what grade the supporting formation is? I happen to know a thing or two about formations, so perhaps I might be able to offer some help." In view of the long lifespan that cultivators had, 3 months could not be considered a long period of time. A simple seclusion could easily take this amount of time. But to Zhongxian, it was a little too long. If it was a simpler formation, perhaps he would be able to help to set it up so as to save some time. "It's a grade 8 formation," Chen Liao replied. "Grade 8. Zhongxian pondered for a moment before nodding. "As long as the formation isn't too complex, I should be able to set it up. May I take a look at the formation blueprint?" Kongshi is a reference to Kongzi, who is known for being the founder of one of the major school of thoughts in China, Confucianism. It's not a religion but rather a set of beliefs of how society should function and the values that the people should embrace. In fact, the entire setting of the master-teacher continent is loosely built on the ideals of Confucianism. For example, under Confucianism, it's believed that parents play a crucial role in a child's upbringing, and if a child grows up spoiled or immoral, the parents would be equally guilty. Chapter 1309 Vicious Awakening. While his comprehension of formations was still limited at 7-star, his foundations were firm because he had studied the Heaven's Path formation art. If required to, as long as he studied the formation blueprint carefully, he would be able to set up basic grade 8 primary formations with ease. Alright. The supporting formation was a specialized formation to augment the transmission range of the Jade communication token, and it was not really a confidential secret or that sort, so Chen Liao did not have to hold it back from Zhongxian. With a flick of her wrist, she passed a formation blueprint over. Zhongxian took the blueprint and began studying it. To make an analogy to his previous world, if the Jade communication token could be viewed as a cell phone, the formation would be as cell towers, serving to strengthen the transmission signals so that the message would be able to travel a greater distance. As simple as it sounded in theory, it was not that easy to carry it out in practice. It's a grade 8 primary formation, and with my current comprehension of formations, I should be able to set it up easily. Zhong Xian frowned. However, I'll still take around 3 days, and the work required for that will be highly intensive. That'll be too troublesome. While his comprehension of formations was already on par with most 8-star low-tier formation masters, there were simply too many aspects that one had to take note of when setting up the formation. The slightest mistake in the amplification of the transmission signal could very well destroy the structure of the communication Jade token, so it was imperative to be absolutely careful in every single one of the details. As a preliminary estimate, Zhong Xian deemed that it would take at least 3 days for him to finish setting it up. 3 days just to set up a formation, that was too extravagant. Knowing that he was limited by his understanding of formations, Zhong Xian pondered for a moment before coming up with a plan. Looks like it's time for me to take the 8-star formation master examination. It was due to his lack of understanding of formations that resulted in his inability to effectively set up the formation. However, as long as he could clear the 8-star formation master examination and access the books about grade 8 formations, he should be able to reduce the time required significantly. Noticing Zhong Xian's frown, Chen Liao asked, "Is Zhongsha able to set up the formation?" "I'm still a little lacking." Zhong Xian shook his head before asking with a smile, "Right, do you know where I can take the 8-star formation master examination in the Sanctum of Sages? I would like to first take the examination before studying how I can set up the supporting formation. I think it would be safer this way. As the highest training institute of the master-teacher continent, the Sanctum of Sages were bound to house branches of other occupations. Otherwise, how would the students of other occupations advance their skills here? Most importantly of all, master-teachers had to clear the prerequisite for their supporting occupations before they could take the master-teacher examination. Everything related to the examination of supporting occupations and the sort can be found in the Hall of Erudition. I have looked into the matter previously, so I know its rough location. Why don't I show you there? Chen Liao answered with a smile. I'll be troubling you then. Through the identity token, he had also gained a rough idea of how the Sanctum of Sages functioned. It was divided into multiple halls, each of them serving a different purpose. However, the structure still differed significantly from that of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy and the Combat Master Hall. The Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy and Combat Master Hall were divided into respective occupation schools or cultivation divisions, such as the Beast Tamer School and Apothecary School for the former, and Martial Arts Division and Soul Division for the latter. On the other hand, the Sanctum of Sages mainly consisted of 5 halls, and they had nothing to do with occupations or the sort. They were namely, attainment, solidarity, propriety, erudition, and integrity. Hall of Attainment, the place where teachers taught and student learned as well as where the impartation of knowledge, learning of techniques, and inheritance of culture took place. Hall of Solidarity, a training ground with all kinds of trials in order to temper one against the otherworldly demonic tribe. It served to promote camaraderie and cooperation among fellow students. Hall of Propriety, the area where duels and battles were conducted. Hall of Erudition, where occupation examinations were conducted and cultivation technique manuals were stored, the place where students would unlock their wisdom. Hall of Integrity, the place where students reinforced their state of mind and tempered their character. Attainment, solidarity, propriety, erudition, and integrity, graciousness, altruism, respect, frugality, and tolerance. These were the 5 pillars of the Sanctum of Sages. Students who had come here to cultivate not only had to be strong, more importantly, they had to be principled and cultured. Zhongsha, you are too courteous. Chen Liao nodded before leading the way forward. The Hall of Erudition, despite being termed as a hall, was not an actual building. Rather, like the 10 schools of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, it referred to an entire branch of the academy. Just the type of occupational examination grounds numbered more than 100. The duo proceeded forward swiftly, and roughly 10 minutes later, they arrived at the entrance. The first thing that they saw was a massive wall that was crafted using some unknown material, and carved at the center was a massive character that induced warmth and tranquility in one. Erudition. This calligraphy looks very familiar. Zhongxian unwittingly halted his footsteps. The calligraphy for the erudition character was vastly different from that of the Sanctum of Sages plaque at the entrance. Even though it did not emanate an overwhelming aura, it created a conception of vastness that was as high as the heavens, as broad as a seemingly endless plain. This reflected the broad-mindedness of the one who had left behind the calligraphy, the great dreams that he harbored for the world. While Zhongxian was still bewildered by the sense of familiarity he felt from the painting, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "This is Kongsha's writing. Vicious, you are awake." Zhongxian's eyes lit up. The person was no one other than Vicious, who had fallen into a dormant state for nearly an entire month after consuming the other Vicious of the marshlands. "Yes. Fortunately, I have managed to assimilate that fellow into me," Vicious replied with a slightly agitated voice. "How are you feeling? Is there any advancement in your cultivation?" Zhongxian asked. Vicious was his trump card, so if the other party's strength grew, it would indubitably be beneficial to him. "Master, after fusing together with my head and my eyes, my strength has grown by leaps and bounds. In my current state, even Saint Seven Dan cultivators won't be a match for me," Vicious replied proudly. "Saint Seven Dan?" Zhongxian was slightly astonished. Just a month ago, that fellow had only been at leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle, and yet, just by fusing together with his brain and eyes, he had managed to advance 2 cultivation realm. This sure was scary. Just what kind of people was he surrounded by? Each of them seemed to be even more monstrous than the other. How pressuring. There was nothing he needed to say about his clone, and judging from what Chen Liao had said earlier, Zhao Huai's cultivation was bound to be far higher than his at the moment. And now, even his subordinate had gained the ability to subdue Saint Seven Dan cultivators. After assimilating the head, I have received a more wholesome understanding of my heritage, especially in terms of soul cultivation. Currently, I have soul cultivation techniques all the way up to Saint Nine Dan, Vicious said. That's great. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. The soul cultivation technique manuals he had obtained from Mo Hunsheng only reached Transcendent Mortal, so after reaching Saint Realm, he had no choice but to stop his soul cultivation for quite a while. After which, he managed to compile the complete Heaven's Path soul art for the first 4 Dans of Saint Realm, and he had also raised his soul cultivation up to Primordial Spirit Realm Pinnacle. With the soul cultivation techniques from Vicious, as long as he could find soul cultivation-related manuals in the future, he would be able to compile them together to form complete Heaven's Path soul art manuals and advance the might of his soul. Wait a moment. A doubt flashed across Zhongxian's mind. Aren't soul cultivation techniques unique to the heritage of soul oracles? Why would Vicious possess them as well? According to what he had gathered from Mo Hunsheng, soul cultivation techniques were a unique heritage of the soul oracles, whereas Vicious was an otherworldly demon. So, why would Vicious possess such a deep understanding of soul cultivation techniques, possessing complete manuals of them even? Forget it, there's no point thinking about that at the moment. Knowing that it would be pointless to think too deep into matters that he did not have an answer to at the moment, Zhongxian continued asking, "Other than soul cultivation techniques, do you have any Zhenqi cultivation techniques?" Vicious was an expert who had rivaled Kongsha many years ago, so the cultivation techniques that he practiced were bound to be incredibly profound. If he could learn them too, that would be deeply beneficial to furthering his fighting prowess. "I do have a few cultivation techniques, but those are intended for otherworldly demons, so I fear they might not be compatible with your constitution. Nevertheless, I'll just send them over to you." After hearing those words, Zhongxian immediately felt a surge of knowledge shooting into his mind. Since even he was capable of transmitting knowledge, considering how Vicious had assimilated the knowledge of the other Vicious too, such a thing was bound to be even easier for him. After browsing through the knowledge he had just received, Zhongxian shook his head. "Indeed, I won't be able to cultivate those cultivation techniques." He could still study the soul cultivation techniques, But the otherworldly demonic tribe's cultivation techniques were completely useless to him. There was a vast difference in the physique of a human and an otherworldly demon, and this was a fundamental problem that even the Library of Heaven's Path could not bridge. As a result, no matter how talented he was, there was simply no way he could practice those cultivation techniques. What a pity! Zhongxian sighed deeply. If only he could practice those cultivation techniques, he would have been spared from a great deal of trouble, and it would have been more convenient for him to achieve breakthroughs. But from the looks of it, it seemed like it was all a pipe dream. After which, both of them continued chatting for a while. Even though the brain did possess most of vicious memories, the immense damage that it had suffered then and the passing of several millenniums had resulted in quite a few memories blurring out. For example, he could only remember the vague outlines of the affairs concerning Kongsha. Knowing that there would be plenty of opportunities to interrogate Vicious in detail now that he was awake, Zhongxian decided to get back on track for the time being. Recalling what Vicious had mentioned earlier, he could not help but ask, "Right. You said earlier that this character was left behind by Kongsha. What do you mean by that?" "Exactly what it means. The erudition character was written by Kongsha, and it's of a much higher level than the writing he left at the Saint Ascension platform. If I could devour it, it would be able to call forth power far greater than before," Vicious remarked in excitement. "Devour?" Zhongxian's face immediately darkened. This fellow sure knows how to dream. This is the sanctum of sages, the highest training institute of the master-teacher continent. You actually want to eat Kongsha's writing here. Before you can even do the deed, you will be pummeled into the ground first. Perhaps, even I would be implicated by you as well. You'd better wipe that thought out of your mind. Zhongxian harumphed coldly before turning his gaze back to the calligraphy. It was no wonder it looked familiar to him. He had studied the writing he had obtained from Kongsha back at the Saint Ascension platform many times, so he was already familiar with the latter's handwriting. Seeing that Zhongxian had abruptly stopped before the calligraphy, Chen Liao explained with a chuckle, "This erudition character is wholesome and well-connected, reminiscent of the sparks of inspiration within a person's mind. Frequent admiring of the calligraphy will help to enhance one's analytical ability, thus opening the doors to erudition." "I see." Zhongxian nodded. This character was indeed far more profound than the words Kongsha had left behind back at the Saint Ascension platform, be it in terms of conception or aesthetics. Even Zhongxian felt like whatever turbidity was weighing down his mind would be cleansed if he observed it for prolonged periods of time, thus enhancing his thinking ability. As expected of a work from Kongsha. In comparison, it seemed like Sage Kuei's words still needed much more work. No wonder most powerful clans are intent on sending their offspring over to the sanctum of sages to study. Putting everything aside, just this calligraphy alone already has the ability to stabilize one's primordial spirit and reinforce one's cultivation. On top of that, it can also suppress any inner demons, granting peace and tranquility, Zhongxian remarked in awe. With Kongsha's massive character standing guard, even inner demons would not dare wreak havoc. Perhaps, this was the main reason most powerful clans would willingly send the most outstanding of their offspring to receive the heritage and guidance of the academy. After staring at the calligraphy for a little longer, Zhongxian turned his head back to Chen Liao and said, "Let's go in." Chen Liao nodded, and the two of them headed into the Hall of Erudition. These words have multiple meanings, so I translated them to those that are most contextualized to the functions of the halls and attempted to cover as many of the meanings as possible. The word used here usually means compassion for the masses, a greater love for the world. However, the word also happens to have the meaning of advancement as well, the concept of improving oneself for the better. Basically, attainment, compassion, solidarity, propriety, erudition, and integrity is what we call 5 constant virtues of Confucianism. I have translated it a little differently from more official sources for the sake of the novel, but the main idea of it is in there. They refer to the fundamental values which those living in a community should follow by in order to ensure collective harmony. As for graciousness, altruism, respect, frugality, and tolerance, they are actually from a story regarding Kongzi. Basically, These are traits which Kongzi Kongshe is perceived to possess by one of his students. Chapter 13:10 The King of Destruction 1. After passing several streets, Zhongxian finally found the location where the Formation Master examination was held. He pushed open the door and walked in. Its interiors were exceptionally cold and quiet, and there were only a couple of people inside. This formed a stark contrast to the bustle that the other Formation Master guilds outside enjoyed. There's a strict limit to the number of candidates that the Sanctum of Sages recruit each year, and only Formation Masters possessing extraordinary talents or capabilities would be able to get in. On the other hand, ordinary students would rarely come over here unless they had to take the Formation Master examination. Chen Leyao explained. It's better this way. I like the quiet. Zhongxian replied with a smile. Most of the examination he had undergone in the past were filled with people, such that regardless of what he did, he would have to queue up. It was terribly troublesome. This should be able to spare him a fair bit of trouble, and it was also aligned with his humble and quiet personality. Are the two of you here to challenge the Formation Master examination? At the front reception, a receptionist who seemed to be in his early 30s stepped forward with a bright smile on his face. The emblem weaved into her robe reflected that he was a 6-star Formation Master. UN. I would like to take the 8-star Formation Master examination. Zhongxian said. 8-star? The receptionist was stunned for a moment before asking, You? Yes. Zhongxian nodded. The occupations of the master-teacher continent maintained a very strict hierarchy concerning the access to books. Only when one's mastery of the occupation had reached the required rank would one be able to read the books deemed to be corresponding in terms of profoundness. If he wished to browse through grade 8 formation books, he would have to become an 8-star Formation Master first. And with his current proficiency, it shouldn't be much of a trouble for him to clear the examination. Pardon me. It's just that you are so young and I was slightly taken aback for a moment. An awkward smile flashed across the receptionist's face as he quickly continued on. May I know if you have brought your 7-star emblem with you here? I'll help you process your application. Here. Flicking his wrist, Zhongxian passed the 7-star Formation Master emblem over. Guild leader Han of the Qingyuan Empire Formation Master Guild had helped him apply for it after witnessing his skills relating to formations back at the Qiuwu Palace. Catching it, the receptionist took a look at the name and flipped open a book. After checking for a moment, he suddenly raised her gaze to look at Zhongxian doubtfully. According to the records, Zhongshe, it has only been 2 months since you cleared the 7-star Formation Master examination. Are you certain that you want to challenge the 8-star Formation Master examination so quickly? Typically speaking, even the highly talented students of the Sanctum of Sages would require several decades of accumulated experience and knowledge before they would be ready to tie the 8-star Formation Master. Yet, this fellow had just barely cleared the 7-star Formation Master examination 2 months ago, and he was already challenged the 8-star examination? This was too fast. That's right. Zhongxian nodded affirmatively. Noted. I have processed your application. All right, come with me. Seeing that the young man was certain on the matter, the receptionist quickly went through the administrative procedures before leading the way forward with a smile. Those who were able to enter the Sanctum of Sages were either from prestigious clans or possessed extraordinary talents. He was only an ordinary receptionist, so there was no way he would dare to show any disdain or disrespect toward them. Very soon, they arrived in a room. The receptionist bowed to an elder standing in the midst of the room and said, Elder Su, Zhongshe over here wishes to challenge the 8-star Formation Master examination. Weaved before the elder's robe was a Formation Master emblem, and on it, 8 brilliant stars shimmered. At the same time, Zhongxian felt a wholesome sensation from the elder's cultivation, and he found that he was unable to tell how strong the latter was without the latter making a move. Given so, it was likely that the elder's cultivation realm was at Saint 7 Dan at the bare minimum. Kongshe has once preached education without discrimination. Those who seek to learn can all become his students. As such, the Sanctum of Sages doesn't just have master teachers but those of other occupations as well. The elder is probably a pure formation master. Zhongxian thought. Through reading the information contained in his identity token, he managed to gain quite an understanding of the sanctum of sages. While master teachers practiced supporting occupations as well, due to their time being divided over a wide span of occupations, it was inevitable that their mastery and depth of knowledge concerning specific occupations would be beneath that of those who specialized solely in it. Take Pavilion Master Wu of the Qingyuan Empire for example. While he possessed considerable mastery as a formation master, when put in comparison with guild leader Han who specialized as a formation master, his skills would be barely worth a mention. Every single unique occupation was profound and powerful, such that even the devotion of a lifetime wouldn't be sufficient to explore the depths of it, let alone for master teachers who regarded them as supporting occupations. And the disparity in proficiency would only grow larger and larger as one approached the top. For this reason, the teachers who taught supporting occupations in the Sanctum of Sages were those who specialized in the specific occupations instead of master teachers. This way, the students would be able to gain a better insight into what each of these occupations fully comprise and was capable of. You wish to take the 8-star Formation Master examination? Elder Su took a look at the information which the receptionist had passed to him, and a deep frown emerged between his brows. To take the 8-star examination, your cultivation would have to reach Grand Dominion Realm at the very minimum, but you are only at leaving Aperture Realm Primary stage at the moment. You won't be able to set up a Grade 8 formation due to your lacking cultivation. The difficulty in setting up higher grade formations didn't just lie in their enhanced complexity but the greater demand in terms of Zhenqi purity and capacity as well. For such a reason, there was a strict requirement on cultivation for formation masters. Zhongxian didn't attempt to conceal his cultivation, so Elder Su was able to see through it with a single look. Reporting to Elder Su, even though Zhongshi's cultivation is only at leaving Aperture Realm Primary stage, in terms of Zhenqi, he pales nowhere in comparison to a Grand Dominion Realm Primary stage cultivator. Chen Liyao interjected. If that's true, I guess I can consider making an exception for you. All right, follow me. Elder Su nodded. Having resided in Sanctum of Sages for a very long time, he had seen all kinds of geniuses. If the young man did possess such capability, it would be fine to make an exception for him too. Thank you, Elder Su. If I may ask, how do you intend to assess my Zhenqi? Seeing that he wasn't shut down on the basis of his lacking cultivation, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. It would really be troublesome if he could only take the examination once his cultivation reached Grand Dominion Realm Primary stage. He would have to find higher-tier spirit stones and the corresponding cultivation techniques for it too. By the time he was done, it would already be several days later. We do have a formation that's specially used to assess one's Zhenqi, Elder Su said before shaking his head in exasperation. However, it was just destroyed by that King of Destruction when he came over earlier, and we haven't been able to fix it yet. King of Destruction? Zhongxian was perplexed by that term. Indeed. He's a student who just got into the Sanctum of Sages a few years back. On his very first year, he challenged the examinations of 3 supporting occupations and brought about great devastation to all 3 examination grounds. This is already the 3rd time he's taking the 8-star Formation Master examination. Hi. This is the reason why our branch appears so cold and quiet too. All of our elders have rushed over to supervise his examination, fearing that he would tear down our steps of formations. Elder Su rubbed his glabella in distress. Brought great devastation? Zhongxian was intrigued by those words. What kind of devastation did he bring? In the past, he used to cause an upheaval each time he took an examination, but as the days went by, he eventually calmed down, becoming more dignified and mature. Putting everything aside, just look at how the mountain gate was still standing even after he had made his round through it. What kind of devastation did he bring? Those words left Elder Su snorting so angrily that even his beard flew into the air. I don't know for the other occupations, but in the 3 occasions that he had come over, he had destroyed at least an item each time. The first time, he destroyed the formation plate which I spent 2 months inscribing with difficulty. The second time, he destroyed an isolation chamber. And this time around, I thought that he just wanted to try out his strength, but he ended up destroying that strength-assessing formation of ours. Honestly, if it's possible, I would ban that king of destruction from setting foot onto our branch ever again. To actually devastate the same location 3 times, he sure is too much. Zhongxian widened his eyes in disbelief at what he was hearing. Even in times that he accidentally caused any damage to an examination facility or the sort, it would only be a one-time-off affair. Yet, that fellow actually caused destruction in the same place thrice. That was really going overboard. It was no wonder why the other party was addressed as the King of Destruction. Indeed. It's just an examination. Does he really have to cause some damage each time he comes? You really can't imagine how furious I get each time I see him. Elder Su slammed his palm on the table furiously. My sentiments exactly. I also find those who destroy public property and make themselves public nuisances abhorrent. But of course, if one were to do it unintentionally, that would be a different matter altogether. Zhongxian remarked vehemently in agreement. It was one thing to do it unintentionally, but those who create destruction with malicious intentions sure were abominable. Forget it, let's not talk about that fellow anymore. The more Elder Su spoke about the matter, the more furious he felt. If he hadn't felt so indignant regarding the matter, a person of his standing would have never nagged about the issue before a student like that either. After venting his frustrations, Elder Su turned to Zhongxian and nodded in satisfaction. You aren't too bad. Normally, whenever he spoke bad things about the King of Destruction, the other students would fidget timidly on the spot, not daring to even breathe loudly. Yet, not only was this young man unafraid, he even unabashedly revealed his resentment for the King of Destruction as well. This made the goodwill he felt for the young man before him shooting furiously up the meter. Alright, you should start making some preparations. I'll assess your strength right now. Elder Su contemplated for a moment before saying, Preparations? Elder Su, didn't you say that the strength assessing formation has been destroyed? How do you intend to assess my strength? Zhongxian asked in intrigue. Simple. I'll suppress my cultivation to Grand Dominion Realm Primary Stage and cross blows with you. As long as you can withstand 3 blows from me, I'll consider it as your pass. Elder Su said with a smile. Under normal circumstances, he had the right to refuse a candidate if his cultivation was beneath the mark, not to mention that the strength assessing formation was destroyed too. But what could he do? The student before him just happened to meet his eye. So, he decided to make a special exception. Alright. Zhongxian was still wondering what kind of examination he would face when he heard those words, and he heaved a sigh of relief. Good. Let's do it here then. Elder Su stood up and walked to the center of the hall. The hall was extremely spacious, so there were no problems having a fight here. Jeji. Suppressing his cultivation down to Grand Dominion Realm Primary Stage, Elder Su waved his hand and said, Feel free to use your full strength. Even though this is an impromptu test to assess if you possess strength on par to a Grand Dominion Realm cultivator, it is still a formal test, so don't expect me to go easy on you. I'll try my best. Zhongxian nodded grimly. Even though the elder had suppressed his cultivation, it was very likely that he was a Saint 7 Dan expert. Be it in terms of eye of discernment or reflexes, he was bound to be far stronger than Zhong Yunfeng. It would be foolish to hold back against such an opponent. Who? With a swift Z-step maneuver, Zhongxian dashed for Elder Su. The movement technique he was utilizing was a Saint intermediate tier battle technique from the Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall. It aimed to prevent one's opponent from launching any surprise attack through a constant change in positioning and movement trajectory. Due to the intricacies in the movement technique, there were very few who would use it in a real battle. However, Zhongxian managed to integrate it perfectly into his attack, flitting swiftly from left to right as if a spectre. Not bad. Elder Su's eyes lit up. Considering how the young man before him was only at leaving Aperture Realm Primary Stage, he had thought that it was an exaggeration to say that the young man possessed strength on par with a Grand Dominion Realm cultivator. However, looking at the swiftly moving silhouette before him, he realized that there might be some credence to those words after all. Wang. While harboring such thoughts, Elder Su released a powerful surge of energy from his body, forming a dominion of 5 meters radius around him. TZ La. Shrouded within a dominion, Zhongxian's movements immediately slowed down, as if he had descended into a bog. I'm going to be making my move. The first attack will be Palm of the Elephant Dragon. It's a technique that harnesses the might of elephants and dragons, and further enhanced by my dominion, it won't be easy for you to overcome it. So, do be careful. The young man before him had heartily listened to his grumbles and even displayed enmity toward the King of Destructions as well. This had left him feeling deep feeling of goodwill for the young man. As such, even though he wasn't planning on going easy, his very warning showed his care and concern for the young man. I'll give it my all. Hearing that, Zhongxian immediately felt an adrenaline rush through his body. With a swift flit, he executed the Unbounded Voyager. Fighting against Zhong Yunfeng had given him a deeper insight into how a dominion worked. In essence, being impeded by a dominion was somewhat equivalent to having a force acting against one. In a sense, it could be viewed as a rope pulling one back, hindering one from making any movement. However, while the rope was taut on one end, it would be relatively slackened on the other. The reason why Zhongxian had used AZ movement earlier was to draw Elder Su's attention into impeding his sideward movement, so that the abrupt use of the Unbounded Voyager would be able to catch Elder Su off guard. And as expected, before the latter could process what was going on, he had already managed to close the gap between the both of them. With a flick of his wrist, he attacked with a palm strike of his own. The other party had said that the palm of the elephant dragon wielded immense strength, so just to be cautious, he used the most powerful palm art he knew against it in retaliation, Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow Pa. Boom! The two palms collided with one another. What? Not expecting the other party to close in the distance between the both of them so swiftly and even execute such a powerful palm art, Elder Su's eyes narrowed in alarm. Before he could even speak, a force harnessing crushing momentum was already crashing down on him. How could he be so powerful? Feeling as if he had been struck by a comet, Elder Su's lips twitched uncontrollably. In the instant of collision, he felt as if someone had shattered every single bone in his body, and he was immediately sent flying backward. In midair, he attempted to unseal his cultivation to ward off the momentum of the attack, but the relentless might of the other party's palm crushing down on him denied him of any chance of doing so. Boom! His crashed heavily into the wall of the room, creating a massive hole behind him. Catcher, catcher! Due to the overwhelming might of the crash, a massive crack swiftly crept up the wall, all the way up to the roof. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.